Life's unexpected twists and turns can make that happen. To those who stayed in touch, I appreciate it. There isn't enough time for the love you send. Seasons change, and so have I. You don't need to wonder why there's no time left. No time left for you. Picture a typical family. I'm the father, Trevor Fruiton, a 45-year-old guy with a receding hairline, in decent shape, but no six-pack abs. I could stand to lose 10 pounds and prefer contacts over glasses. I still don't need reading glasses. The mother of the family, Michela, is also 45 and has a slight tummy and a well-rounded figure, a look I prefer. She's an average woman, not strikingly beautiful or ugly, who wears glasses and insists on her full name. Then there's our 21-year-old daughter, Allie, a smart college senior who's gained some weight since her high school volleyball days. She's fiercely independent and vocal about women's rights, though she still relies on us. I'm the only one working, and finances have been tight. I didn't want Allie burdened with student debt, so she lives at home. But that doesn't mean Michela or Allie don't enjoy nice things. I drive an old F-150, while they have fancy luxury cars. Our home has little equity, and they funded their lifestyle with home equity loans. Our neighborhood is like many suburban areas, with occasional block parties. We're not particularly close to our neighbors, except for the neighbors next door, whose daughter Sally is Allie's best friend. After Allie started college, I felt lost. We had spent so much time together, and now there was a void. Even my volunteer work didn't seem to help, so one night I asked her if she was happy. I inquired, "Michela, are you happy?" She replied, "Happy with what?" I continued, "Your life. You've pulled away from me and lost your spark. I miss the time we used to spend with Allie. I guess I'm bored. How about us? Is there something I'm doing or not doing for you?" Michela assured me, "We're fine. I have no complaints. Why all the questions? I just want you to be happy. Maybe you can find a counselor to help you find balance and improve your mood." I pondered. "I'm not sure. I'll think about it." With a little chill in the air, I dropped the subject. However, 2 weeks later, Michela started weekly sessions with a life coach. You might think that I hoped things would heat up in our bedroom, but no. We maintain our usual twice-a-week intimate schedule. Are we normal? I have no idea. I've never discussed my life in bed with anyone, and I don't pry into my friends' intimate details. Mark and Cindy, our neighbors to the south, are in their 60s. Mark is not the handiest guy, and Cindy loves to bake, which has led to a few extra pounds for me. One day, I was working on Mark's sauna pump, and I overheard a conversation. They discussed, "Our sliding patio door is making that scratching noise again. Unless Michela is back from her mother's, it must be Allie. Haven't seen him in a while, so I'm sitting in the backyard gazebo. I overheard Allie's conversation. She mentioned, he's inside somewhere. His car is still here. I couldn't believe my ears as I heard her say, "God, Mom, you're outdated. Give Max a try. Sally says he's a wild one, and make sure you're satisfied." Maybe this is what you need to spice things up in the bedroom. You've been complaining to our daughter about our love life. That's just not right. I know you should think about it. By the way, Dad told me he's going hunting next weekend. I'll have Jeff invite Max over. He might be scrawny, but he's into you. Sally also mentioned that his size is just right for some fun. I was fuming, thinking, so my daughter is trying to set Michela up with Jeff's friend? You don't have to do anything, but since you've never tried anything like that, consider experimenting with Max. I was seething, and the next pause was due to my boiling anger. The BCH and her offspring are plotting to end my marriage. What did I do to deserve this? Okay, well, let me know. Love you too. Bye-bye. I was really angry. I'm fortunate I didn't injure myself while fixing that frustrating pump. Things were miserable at home all week. I went out of my way to annoy Michelle and Allie. It worked, and I spent most of the week in my office or out in the garage. I've also sharpened and cleaned my power tools. I didn't postpone my hunting trip, though. I had someone keep an eye on Michela's activities. Seeing pictures of Allie, Jeff, and a skinny guy entering the house around noon on Saturday wasn't a good sign. Allie and Jeff left around 2, and the skinny guy left at 4. When I returned late Sunday, Michela was trying to be affectionate, but I wasn't having it. While it didn't confirm anything, I noticed Michela was sitting strangely, with her legs crossed and leaning left more than usual. She seemed a bit uncomfortable. Later in the kitchen, Allie sealed their fate by playfully slapping Michela's behind, and they both giggled with fake coughs. I felt a weight on my chest, and I worried that the people I was hunting with might have exposed me to something. I decided to sleep on the living room couch to avoid Michelle. In the morning, I announced that I was going to the doctor with a fake illness, claiming I had trouble breathing. My boss had no issue with me taking the day off. My plan was to pretend to have COVID, which would give me time to move forward with my exit strategy. With accumulated sick leave and vacation time, I could take enough time off to reach our traditional Christmas Eve dinner. Announcing a COVID diagnosis usually keeps people at bay. Did I actually have COVID? I wasn't sure. I was fully vaccinated and felt healthy, but my heart was broken, and I wanted to part ways with 4 people while my lungs were fine. I checked into an extended stay hotel. There was no reason for me to live like a pauper. Michelle seemed relieved when I told her I'd be out of quarantine in time for Christmas Eve. She and her daughter called me twice a day. To avoid revealing my plans, I was polite, but pretended to be tired to get off the phone. I spent my time plotting revenge and making preparations, like updating wills, beneficiaries, and emergency contacts. Apartment hunting was challenging and drove home the finality of my decision to divorce Michelle and push Allie into the real world. When you're consumed by anger, all sorts of thoughts cross your mind. Most of them could land me in jail, which didn't align with my future plans. The idea of hiring an escort to trap Jeff came from watching a news story about a company that did the same to get rid of unwanted employees. It was a double-edged sword that would also hurt Allie, which, in my opinion, she deserved. Our artificial tree was lit up with blinking red, white, and green lights, and pine cones gave off a holiday scent. We gathered around the dining room table for our Christmas Eve tradition, which we had maintained for 23 years. The first 2 years were without Allie. Michelle had cooked a meal, which was now in front of us. Normally, we'd offer a short prayer of thanks, but not this time. I stood up to speak, but it wasn't going to be a cheerful toast. I began by asking Jeff about Heather, and as I did, his face lost color. Allie turned her curious gaze toward him. Allie and Jeff had been together since high school, and it seemed like they'd be together for many more years. Things were about to change, though. Jeff stammered, claiming he didn't know a Heather. I pressed further, mentioning the raven-haired beauty with ruby lips he was with last Sunday night. Jeff was as stunned as a deer in headlights. At this point, he resorted to denial, claiming he couldn't recall the name, but his words lacked conviction. I confronted him with an audio clip from my cell phone, where a voice could be heard saying, "OCK, Heather, you're awesome, don't stop. God, I'm CM again." After turning off the recording, it was clear that the voice was Jeff's. Allie went into a rage, accusing him of deception and demanding that he leave. Before Jeff could get up, I stood behind him and pushed him back into his chair. Jeff and I prevented Allie from attacking him. I instructed Michelle to take our daughter into the other room and calm her down, explaining that I and Junior were going to have a talk. Michelle escorted Allie out of the dining room and into the kitchen. It wasn't done quietly, as Allie's string of 4-letter words echoed off the walls. It only took a few minutes to explain to Jeff how things would unfold. He was to warn Max to stay far away from me, or Max would deeply regret his existence as a man. Jeff understood where he stood and what limited options he had from my perspective. A manila envelope moved, and Jeff agreed to do one last thing for me. I called out to the kitchen, asking Michelle to come back in with Allie. They both looked shocked and tearful. Let me explain how I got that recording. Jeff, her name isn't Heather, and I don't know her real name. She's an expensive escort, I must add. I hired her to seduce you and record the encounter. There's also a video if you'd like to watch it. Allie exclaimed, "Daddy, what the hell? You hired her?" I admitted, "I did, sweetie. How does it feel to be betrayed, stabbed in the back?" Michelle made a tiny noise, and Allie's eyes briefly darted toward and away from her mother. Both women were in tears. "Jeff, do you have something to say?" I turned on the video mode of my cell phone camera. Jeff stood up, took the folder in front of him, and then addressed Michelle. "Michelle Fruiton, you've been served." As he handed the folder to Michelle, I wasn't sure if she would vomit or faint. She would likely do one or the other shortly after regaining her composure. The pine cones couldn't compete with the impact of Jeff handing Michelle divorce papers. While Allie and Michelle consoled each other in the master bedroom, I took charge outside. Allie's Audi, an early graduation gift, was loaded onto a carrier and driven away. Everything from her car was left in a trash bag on the front porch. Michela's BMW followed soon after, but the difference was that her things were moved to a 23-year-old sedan, symbolizing our 23 years of marriage. My lawyer reminded me that I still had to provide transportation for Michela. With our credit cards paid off and canceled, both of Allie's cards were canceled since I was the co-signer. I took another shot of bourbon. Cell phones were canceled as well. I had to give Michela a basic phone with limited talk time and text messages. Allie received no such consideration. Both kept their iPhones with all the bells and whistles. In the garage, there was a for sale sign that I swiftly planted in the front yard with a few hits of my hammer. I couldn't actually sell the house yet, since Michela's name was on the title, but I wanted her to know what our future held. Instead of listening to the Christmas music playing in the living room by the tree, I retreated to the basement. Sitting in the dark was comforting at times, especially when I heard the commotion above me. As they realized that none of their possessions were working, I was called some less-than-Christian names. Those names were mild compared to the ones I had been yelling in my empty hotel room while preparing for this day. "Trevor, we need to talk," was their statement. They speculated that maybe he went for a walk, noticing that his car was still at home, but my car was missing. They thought perhaps Dad had taken it, but he couldn't be driving both. They questioned the presence of an unfamiliar car in front of the house. Their phones weren't working, and they suspected he had canceled their service. They decided to go see if Cindy would let them use her phone. Calm returned to the house, but it was a tactical error on their part. I locked the entry doors. Now they were out of the house without working phones or credit cards. Both left their purses inside, so they had no identification on them. I felt no remorse when I shredded their driver's licenses. It may be petty, but I'm sure it will cause them discomfort as they try to rebuild their lives. Refilling my shot glass, I turned on the television and watched a few minutes of a cheesy feel-good special. Our situation couldn't be farther from the heartwarming story on screen. Sitting in silence seemed like a better choice. There was a commotion at the front door when Michela and Allie returned. It was then that Michela's daughter, whom I no longer claimed as my own, realized what was in the trash bag on the porch. Allie shrieked, "Oh my God, this is everything I had in my car. Daddy got rid of my car. Michela wasn't buying it. He wouldn't do that. It's just not something he would do." "Well, Mom, maybe the reason your car is missing is that he sold it too. I'll be mad if he did. I loved that car." With the doorbell ringing every 2 seconds, it was hard to catch all of their conversations. Michela was furious. "Trevor, open this door right now. It's freezing out here," I shouted back at them. "Well, Mitch, the keys to your new car are in the ignition. That orange and green Malibu parked in front of the house is your new set of wheels. All your belongings from your old car have been moved over. I'm told the heater takes a while to warm up. It has a full tank of gas. Maybe you could offer your Estimax and stay at his place. He probably still has a thing for you." One yelped, "Lock," and the other said, "He knows." "Trevor, please let me explain." Michela made a feeble attempt to extend the conversation. A few seconds of silence passed, and Michela tried a sweeter voice. "Trevor, I know you can hear me. Say something. Merry Christmas. You better leave, Mishi. And take that woman with you." A few minutes later, the old Malibu roared to life. It sounded like it needed a new muffler, but I wasn't surprised, as the guy practically gave me the car to get it off his hands. It wasn't getting fixed on my dime. Without any fanfare, the two traders drove away from the house. It had been ages since I heard about anyone dying from carbon monoxide poisoning due to their muffler. Maybe I'd get lucky. Probably not. About an hour later, I noticed my father-in-law's phone number lighting up my cell phone. We've never been close, but we tolerate each other. After considering whether to answer, I let it go to voicemail. "Hey, Trevor, I've got a couple of upset women here. Thought you might be able to shed some light on the situation. Call me. By the way, Merry Christmas." I muted my cell and sipped some spiked eggnog. Gradually, I came down from my adrenaline rush. The blinking lights of the fake tree put me to sleep. The sun was shining on this cold Christmas morning. All the dishes were still on the dining room table, but the microwave did a good job of heating up my ham and cheesy potatoes. Ham and cheesy potatoes work any time. There were gifts waiting to be opened, but Santa left me nothing, as those gifts under the tree were meant to be opened after dinner. Had anyone even noticed? I hadn't given a single gift to any of them, and I didn't open theirs. Instead, I gathered my most cherished belongings. I didn't include any photos of the family. Any that I found were now scattered on the ground. It took Michela a few days to find me at my hotel. The sun had set, and there was a bitter breeze. I left the latch on when I answered the door. I half expected another poinsettia sales pitch for a youth sports team, but it was a pale-faced Michela without her usual makeup or done-up hair. Michela pleaded, "Trevor, please don't close the door." I didn't close it as I replied, "What do you want, Mishi?" She asked, "A chance to explain. Can I come in?" I firmly responded, "No." She continued, "Please, Trevor. Your neighbors don't need to hear this." I replied, "What part of no don't you understand? I'd be happy to explain it to you." Michela sighed, "Okay, let me start by saying how sorry I am. I can't explain my actions." I asked, "What actions are you talking about?" "Mishi, please," I urged. "Trevor, not out here. Let me come in and talk about it." She revealed softly, "Having closeness with Max." I reacted, "You had something with Max? Well, don't that beat all?" Her eyes widened as I continued. "You didn't know?" She admitted, "I suspected, but now it's confirmed. Actions have consequences. Wait, you were going to divorce me without any proof?" I replied, "Guessed right, didn't I? Have you found an attorney yet?" She responded, "I'm working on it, but we don't need a divorce. I'll do anything you want to save our marriage." I said, "A little late for that. Why didn't you decide to do anything to save our marriage a month ago?" "I know why. It's because you're selfish and think you're above consequences. You thought you could do whatever you wanted without repercussions. Did you? Tell me immediately. A day later? A week later? How many others have there been?" Michela recoiled at the venom in my voice. "That was the only time. You have to believe me. One stupid decision shouldn't doom our marriage." I pressed, "Which stupid decision?" "I count many. Planning to cheat might get you a reprieve. Cheating is a deal breaker. Hiding your cheating ensured no chance of reconciliation. Worst of all was involving your daughter, as I want nothing to do with her anymore. This is all on you. If you had kept your bedroom matters private, she would have never been involved. I hate you." Some of the neighbors were getting their kicks watching this drama unfold. I told her, "Trevor," I said, "I'm sorry. How can I make this up to you?" "You can't. I hope I'm better off without you. Maybe I will be, maybe I won't, but it's on my terms. Divorce your cheating self and move on, understand? Please, Trevor, I know you're hurt and angry, but please don't do anything for a couple of weeks. It was just one afternoon. What can I do to convince you?" I replied, "Just leave and never bother me again. Now, if you'll excuse me, halftime is over, and the bowl game is starting again. Thanks for stopping by. Not." I closed the door. Michela knocked and begged softly, but my noise-canceling headphones did their job. I don't know how long it lasted, but she wasn't there in the morning. 11 months later, I sat in my one-bedroom apartment, continuing the Christmas Eve tradition, alone by choice. A simple meal that I cooked myself after getting the hang of cooking. They say you get stabbed in the back, but in reality, it shattered my heart, ego, and confidence. My self-respect remained intact. Many nights I wondered if I overreacted. Not once did I agree with that. I became disposable, so I left. Case closed. My time in the limbo of divorce left me feeling defeated. I was often irritable, and my boss had to reprimand me for snapping at coworkers. As time passed, I withdrew from social life and became a recluse. My coworkers learned to keep their distance, and I focused on doing my job well. I skipped company parties. Friends attempted to set me up on dates, but I turned them down one by one, and eventually, they stopped calling. My self-pity seemed never-ending. I took up running, and the sight of my earbuds discouraged people from approaching me. Between my new hobby and cooking for myself, I needed to put on some weight since none of my old clothes fit. Occasionally, a coworker would compliment my appearance, but it rarely went beyond that. The divorce proceedings stretched out for 9 months, and our house sold quickly. Instead of monthly support, Michela received a substantial share of the proceeds from the sale. Allie and Jeff went their separate ways, with Jeff blaming me for setting him up with Heather. It's always someone else's fault I wasn't there with Heather. He was. And he was weak, like most men his age. A seductive woman can easily lead them astray. As for Allie, she left me angry voicemails, but I never returned her calls. Maybe someday I'll answer, but I wouldn't bet on it. I neither received an invitation nor attended her graduation. The situation was particularly challenging for Michaela, as she hadn't held a full-time job since our marriage. My attorney prolonged the financial matters as much as possible. Once the house finally sold, I repaid all the money. The court ruled that she should have been receiving maintenance, and now her comfortable lifestyle was gone. The same applied to mine. During some of the attorney conferences, Michaela tried to convince me that she had been incredibly foolish, but I remained stoic, leading to a few tears. Hate is a powerful emotion, and I couldn't seem to control mine. 12 months later, we continued the Christmas Eve tradition in my apartment. Macy, a friend who had been through a similar experience, joined me. No, we weren't in a romantic relationship. I wasn't ready for that yet. After we finished cleaning up the dishes, Macy led me to the middle of the living room, and we danced closely. At times I missed the warmth of a willing woman against me, but after about 10 songs, Macy wiped away a tear and left. We were both damaged goods. Allie's tone in the voice messages she left about once a month changed. She sounded apologetic, but I never returned her calls. My mother accidentally revealed that Michaela had moved in with someone new. I was surprised that my reaction was mostly indifference. I started making small talk with people again. Former coworkers avoided me, and new ones thought I was weird. Making friends was challenging, but I managed to bridge the gap with Macy, and we remained friends. In late January, I received a letter from Ali. I debated whether to open it, but curiosity won. The letter contained a short note and a selfie. "Daddy, I'm sorry that I did you wrong. As you can see in the picture, I'm pregnant. I was wondering if you could find it in your heart to include a grandchild in your life. If not, I understand. Love, Allie." The return address was a few counties over, and there was no mention of a husband. In the picture, I felt torn. I resented what she had done to my life, but I had always wanted grandchildren. It would be a few weeks before I responded. In the meantime, Macy and I parted ways. We both knew we were only there for each other to lean on. She decided to move far away and start over. With a few lingering hugs, she left my life. To keep from going crazy, I took up pickleball at the rec center. It's similar to tennis, but with different rules. Eventually, I played with people of similar abilities, which felt like junior high school. During one game, I accidentally hit Shannon, one of the players, and her friends teased her, suggesting I should kiss it to make it better. I blew her some kisses, and as we were heading out, she asked if I could buy her a soft drink. She said I was very quiet and shy. We walked to a nearby Jamba Juice and continued chatting. We learned about each other, and Shannon was a great conversationalist, unlike me. She eventually asked if I was seeing someone, and I admitted I wasn't, and I wasn't sure if I ever would again. Shannon inquired about my previous relationship. Did she die or leave you? I responded, she cheated on me, and I either couldn't or wouldn't accept it. It's been a few years, and well, I guess I'm not over it. Shannon then asked, what about you? Are you dating anyone? I replied, no one. She seemed surprised. Really? I elaborated, I go on dates, but that's about it. When was the last time you went on a date? Shannon shared, well, I haven't been on a proper date since we separated. I've had people over for dinner, but that's it. I asked, when did your marriage end? She told me, that was December, 26 months ago. Pretty sad, isn't it? I reassured her, not really. When I was dumped for a younger woman, it took me a couple of years to regain the confidence to try again. This entire conversation was making my palms sweaty. Shannon noticed. Let's change the subject, I suggested. Why did you start playing pickleball? Shannon explained, my self-pity was getting tiresome, so I thought I needed something new to do. I shared, that's how I got into it too. My friends convinced me, and I've come to enjoy it. How about you? Shannon said, yeah, I got a paddle, and playing is helping me come out of my shell. Well, I have to run. See you tomorrow. I'm playing at 4 p.m. I replied, sure, nice chatting with you, Shannon. She offered some encouragement. You too, Trevor. Hang in there. Things will only get better. That evening, I felt good enough about myself to respond to Allie. Allie, I'm willing to try. You and I will never be close, but I'd like to at least meet my grandchild. Please let me know when the time is right. Under no circumstances will I be in the same room as your mother, Mr. Fruden. As Allie showed in the selfie, I estimated a May or June delivery date. I'm not sure if Allie received my response, as I haven't received another letter from her. The next day at pickleball, Shannon was quite flirtatious, as were a few other ladies. It felt good. After hitting a particularly good shot, Shannon said, "You know, Trevor, you look really good in that shirt. I bet you look even better out of it." The women giggled as my face turned red. "Funny you should say that, Shannon. I was thinking that you looked really good in those yoga pants. I bet you'd look even better out of them, too." There was hysterical laughter as Shannon turned bright red. Then the ladies started chanting, "Take 'em off! Take 'em off! Take 'em off!" I obliged and took my shirt off. Shannon shook her head vigorously while wagging her finger at me as if I was in trouble. A few of the ladies whistled. As I put my shirt back on, Shannon mouthed, "You're terrible," at me. I blew her a kiss. After the games, there was some light-hearted banter among the ladies, with one of them joking about looking great out of yoga pants. Shannon patiently waited her turn. I engaged in a friendly conversation, and eventually, Shannon asked if I'd buy her a soft drink. I responded saying, "I was just about to ask you." Shannon playfully remarked, "Nice. Yoga pants, huh? Pretty proud of yourself, aren't you?" As we enjoyed our drinks, I mustered the courage to ask Shannon out for dinner and a movie, fearing rejection. Thankfully, she agreed, and having been out of the dating scene for over 27 years, I felt clueless, awkward, and scared initially. But with time, I began to relax, and my previous upbeat personality started to emerge. After several dates, Shannon suggested I spend the night. One evening, Shannon surprised me with a personal question. She asked, "Who were you thinking of when we were intimate?" I had to pause and appreciate you. I wondered what you saw in a person like me. I replied, "A mirror reflection." Our passionate connection grew, and we became more intimate with time. Shannon eventually introduced me to her family and grandchildren, which was initially awkward due to their protective nature. However, as time passed, they accepted me. In early June, Shannon cuddled up to me in bed and suggested celebrating our closeness. As the moment grew more passionate, I realized what she meant, and I shared my knowledge of Ali giving birth to a girl 2 days ago. Our passions flared briefly, and then we made love for an extended period. The next day, I sent flowers to Ali to acknowledge her new motherhood. A day later, I received an overnight letter from Ali, expressing her sincere apologies and the desire to reconnect with me. She mentioned her understanding of the lessons I tried to teach her and the changes she had undergone. She also mentioned her daughter, Bonnie, and the possibility of us reuniting. I shared the letter with Shannon, who found Ali's words sincere and asked me what I intended to do. I expressed my concern about the impact on my relationship with Shannon and received a warm hug and a loving kiss in response. Shannon emphasized the need to let go of the past so that our relationship could flourish. With Shannon by my side, I knocked on Ali's door, surprising her. We shared affectionate cheek hugs and entered her apartment. I held Bonnie and she didn't cry, reminding me of how small babies' hands and feet are. Shannon brought up Ali's marital status, and Ali explained that Bonnie's father was reluctant to commit. Throughout the evening, Ali and I kept our distance. Before leaving, Shannon urged me to express my love to Ali, and I returned to Ali's apartment to give her a hug and tell her that I still loved her. 6 months and a few weeks later, the traditional Christmas Eve dinner was hosted in my apartment, with Shannon, Ali, and me holding Bonnie. I delivered the Christmas blessing, and we all dined and exchanged gifts. Shannon and I spent the night at her house, marking a change in our relationship. 12 months later, we celebrated Christmas Eve at Shannon's house, and life had moved forward. I had found contentment in my life's new chapter.
Welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. Thank you for tuning in. We've got another gripping story for you today, and we hope it keeps you entertained. Let's not wait any longer. Let's dive into the story. Franklin Browning's flight touched down at 2:17 p.m., a full 3 hours earlier than expected. As he strode through the airport, his mind raced with possibilities. The breakthrough he'd made on his sustainable water filtration project could change everything, not just for his career, but for millions without access to clean water. He hailed a cab, barely noticing the driver's attempt at small talk. Franklin's fingers tapped restlessly on his briefcase. Inside were the notes that could revolutionize his field. He couldn't wait to share the news with Stella. She'd been supportive through all the late nights and missed dinners. Now he could finally show her it was worth it. The cab pulled up to their modest apartment building. Franklin paid quickly, grabbed his luggage, and bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. He fished for his keys, then paused. Stella's voice drifted through the door, low and intense. "I can't take it anymore, Anthony," she was saying. "Franklin's always working, and when he's home, he's obsessing over his world-changing ideas. What about my dreams? My need for adventure?" Franklin's hand froze on the doorknob. His mind reeled, trying to process what he was hearing. Stella continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're right, Anthony. I deserve better. Someone who can give me the life I want." The world tilted sideways. Franklin steadied himself against the wall, his breath coming in short gasps. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything they'd been through together. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. Then he turned the key and stepped inside. Stella whirled around, her face draining of color. "Franklin, I didn't know you were home," she stammered, fumbling to end the call. "Clearly," Franklin replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He set down his briefcase with deliberate care. "I think we need to talk." Stella's eyes darted around the room, looking everywhere but at her husband. "Talk? About what?" "I was just on the phone with a friend." "A friend?" Franklin's tone was flat. "And does this friend have a name?" "Anthony, perhaps?" Stella's posture stiffened. "You were eavesdropping?" "I came home early to surprise you," Franklin said. "Seems I'm the one who got the surprise." The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then something in Stella's expression shifted. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold anger. "Fine," she spat. "Yes, I was talking to Anthony. And you know what? I'm glad you heard. I'm sick of pretending everything's okay when it's not." Franklin fought to keep his voice level. "And what exactly isn't okay, Stella? I thought we were building a life together, working towards our goals." Stella laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Our goals? You mean your goals. Your precious work that always comes first. When's the last time you asked about my dreams?" "I've always supported your dreams," Franklin said, struggling to understand. "I thought we were in this together." "Together?" Stella's voice dripped with scorn. "You're so naive, Franklin. While you've been chasing your fantasy of saving the world, I've been suffocating. Anthony sees me for who I really am. He wants to give me the life I deserve." Franklin's jaw clenched. "The life you deserve? And what life is that, exactly?" Stella's eyes glittered. "Adventure, excitement, passion, all the things you've forgotten about while you're buried in your work. Anthony's taking me to Bora Bora next month. When's the last time you even took me to dinner?" The words hit Franklin like a physical blow. He thought of all the nights he'd worked late, convinced he was doing it for their future. Had he really been so blind? "So that's it?" he asked, his voice tight with anger and hurt. "You're throwing away our marriage for a vacation?" Stella stalked towards him, her face flushed. "It's not about the vacation, Franklin. It's about the life I deserve. Anthony can give me that. You can't." She paused, then delivered the final blow. "I want a divorce." Franklin stood rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. The life he thought he knew was crumbling around him. But beneath the shock and pain, something else stirred. A cold, hard resolve. "A divorce," he repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Is that really what you want, Stella?" She nodded, chin lifted defiantly. Franklin's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll get one. But don't think for a second this ends here." He turned on his heel and strode to the bedroom, yanking open drawers and shoving clothes into a suitcase. Stella followed, her bravado faltering slightly. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Leaving," Franklin said shortly. "You made your choice. Now you can live with it." He zipped the suitcase closed with more force than necessary. As he brushed past Stella, she grabbed his arm. "Franklin, wait. We should talk about this. About arrangements." He shook off her hand. "We'll talk through our lawyers." You wanted a divorce, Stella. Congratulations. You've got one. With that, he walked out the door, not sparing a glance behind him. The cool evening air hit his face as he emerged from the building. He hailed a cab, giving the address of a nearby hotel. As the city lights blurred past the window, Franklin's mind raced. The excitement of his breakthrough seemed a lifetime ago. Now, all he could think about was how quickly everything had fallen apart. But beneath the turmoil, a steely determination took root. Stella thought she could discard him so easily? She had no idea what was coming. Franklin Browning was not a man to be trifled with, and he would make damn sure she remembered that. The weeks that followed were a blur of work and legal meetings. Franklin threw himself into his project with renewed vigor, channeling his pain into determination. The water filtration system became his obsession, his reason for getting up each morning. Stella, for her part, seemed intent on making the divorce as painful as possible. Her demands were outrageous, her attitude spiteful. Franklin weathered it all with a cold detachment that unnerved even his own lawyer. At the office, Franklin's colleagues noticed the change in him. Gone was the easygoing researcher, replaced by a man of singular focus and drive. No one dared to slack off or question his methods. All except Susan Chun. Susan had been Franklin's friend and fellow environmental engineer for years. She watched his transformation with growing concern. One night, as the office emptied and Franklin remained hunched over his computer, she decided to intervene. "Franklin," she said softly, approaching his desk, "are you okay? You've been here day and night." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot but focused. "I'm fine, Susan. Just focused on making this project work. It's all I have left." Susan hesitated, then pulled up a chair. "You know that's not true. You have friends here. People who care about you." Franklin's expression softened slightly. "I appreciate that, Susan. I do. But right now, I need to concentrate on this. It's the only thing keeping me sane." Susan nodded, understanding in her eyes. Then she straightened, her tone becoming more businesslike. "Well, in that case, I have some news that might interest you. There's a major corporation interested in our filtration system. They want to meet next week." For the first time in weeks, a spark of genuine excitement lit Franklin's eyes. "Really? Who?" "Global Hospitality Group," Susan said. "They're looking to implement eco-friendly systems in their resorts worldwide. If we can impress them, it could be huge for us." Franklin nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Then we'd better be ready to blow them away." As Susan left, Franklin reflected on their friendship. She'd been his rock through this ordeal, always there with a word of encouragement or a fresh perspective on their work. For the first time since that fateful night, he felt a glimmer of hope. He turned back to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. Stella thought she'd broken him. Anthony thought he could steal Franklin's life. But they had no idea what he was capable of. This project wasn't just about clean water anymore. It was about proving to the world, and to himself, that Franklin Browning was a force to be reckoned with. As the night deepened, Franklin worked on, fueled by determination and the promise of redemption. The city slept, unaware that within its midst, a man was forging a plan that would change not just his life, but countless others. And when the dust settled, those who had underestimated him would learn the true cost of their mistake. 2 years had passed since that fateful night when Franklin Browning's world shattered. The pain of betrayal had long since hardened into cold determination. Now, he stood in a sleek boardroom, facing a panel of executives from Global Hospitality Group. His patented water filtration system, once just a dream, was about to become a reality. Franklin's eyes swept the room, taking in the expectant faces. He'd rehearsed this presentation countless times with Susan. Every word, every slide, was perfectly calibrated for maximum impact. He wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. "Gentlemen," Franklin began, his voice steady and confident. "What you're about to see will revolutionize water usage in the hospitality industry." For the next hour, Franklin laid out his vision. He spoke of sustainability, of drastic reductions in water waste, of the potential to bring clean water to drought-stricken regions. The executives leaned forward, their eyes gleaming with interest. As Franklin concluded, a heavy silence fell over the room. Then, Slowly, Gilbert Guerrero, the CEO of Global Hospitality Group, began to applaud. The other executives followed suit. Mr. Browning, Gilbert said, standing to shake Franklin's hand. That was truly impressive. Your system could indeed revolutionize water usage in our resorts worldwide. Franklin allowed himself a small smile. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I'm glad you see the potential. Gilbert nodded, then paused, his expression turning serious. We're not just interested in licensing, Mr. Browning. We want to acquire your company outright. Franklin's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment he'd been working towards for years. But he couldn't show his excitement. Not yet. I'm open to discussing terms, Mr. Guerrero, Franklin said carefully. But I have one condition. Gilbert raised an eyebrow. Oh. Franklin met his gaze steadily. I want a controlling stake in your Bora Bora resort. The room fell silent. Gilbert's eyes narrowed slightly, a mix of confusion and intrigue on his face. That's an unusual request, Mr. Browning. May I ask why? Franklin maintained his composure, his voice cool and professional. Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing this particular property succeed with our new technology. Gilbert studied Franklin for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I see. Well, Mr. Browning, you've certainly piqued my curiosity. Why don't we discuss this further over dinner? I have a feeling there's an interesting story behind this request. As the meeting adjourned, Franklin felt a surge of triumph. He was one step closer to his goal. Stella and Anthony thought they'd left him behind, broken and defeated. They had no idea what was coming. Later that evening, over a lavish dinner, Franklin laid out his vision for the Bora Bora resort. He spoke of making it a showcase for sustainable luxury, a model for the entire industry. Gilbert listened intently, clearly impressed by Franklin's passion and knowledge. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Browning, Gilbert said as they shook hands at the end of the night. But I think we can make this work. Our legal team will draw up the paperwork. Welcome to Global Hospitality Group. Franklin allowed himself a genuine smile. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I look forward to our partnership. As he left the restaurant, Franklin pulled out his phone and dialed Susan's number. Well? Susan's voice was tense with anticipation. We did it, Franklin said simply. They're buying the company, and I'm getting Bora Bora. Susan's whoop of joy echoed through the phone. Franklin, that's amazing. I knew you could do it. We did it, Susan, Franklin corrected her. I couldn't have done this without you. There was a pause on the other end of the line. So, what happens now? Franklin's voice hardened slightly. Now? Now we prepare for Phase 2. Weeks of intense negotiations and paperwork followed. Franklin threw himself into the work, fine-tuning every detail of the agreement. Finally, the day arrived. Franklin stood in Gilbert's office, pen in hand, ready to sign the final documents. Mr. Browning, Gilbert said, a note of admiration in his voice. I must say, you've impressed me at every turn. Are you sure you won't reconsider my offer to join our board of directors? Franklin shook his head, smiling slightly. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero, but I prefer a more hands-on approach. I'll be heading to Bora Bora next week to oversee the implementation personally. Gilbert nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. Well, I look forward to seeing the results. Good luck, Mr. Browning. As Franklin signed his name with a flourish, he felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. Stella and Anthony had no idea what was coming. The flight to Bora Bora was long, but Franklin hardly noticed. His mind was consumed with plans and strategies. As the plane touched down, he took a deep breath. This was it, the moment he'd been working towards for 2 years. Franklin stepped off the plane, the warm tropical air enveloping him. A man in a crisp suit approached, hand extended. Mr. Browning? I'm Arthur McCarty, the resort manager. It's an honor to have you here. Franklin shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Mr. McCarty. I'm looking forward to seeing the property. As they walked towards the waiting car, Arthur launched into an enthusiastic description of the resort. Your filtration system is already making waves in the industry, Mr. Browning. We've had inquiries from other resorts asking about it. Franklin nodded, only half listening. His eyes scanned the surroundings, taking in every detail. Somewhere on this island, Stella and Anthony were living their dream life. He allowed himself a small, cold smile. Not for much longer. The resort was impressive, a sprawling complex of luxury bungalows and pristine beaches. As Arthur led him on a tour, Franklin made mental notes. He'd need to know every inch of this place for his plan to work. They were passing the main bar when Franklin froze. There, behind the counter, was a familiar face. Anthony Levine, looking considerably less polished than Franklin remembered, was mixing drinks for a group of tourists. Their eyes met. Anthony's face drained of color, his hand fumbling the bottle he was holding. "Is something wrong, Mr. Browning?" Arthur asked, noticing Franklin's sudden stillness. Franklin's voice was cool when he replied, "No, nothing at all. But I think we need to review the staff roster. I have some concerns about quality control." Arthur looked confused but nodded. "Of course, sir. We can do that right away if you'd like. Tomorrow will be fine," Franklin said smoothly. "For now, I'd like to see my accommodations. It's been a long flight." As they walked away, Franklin could feel Anthony's eyes boring into his back. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. Let him sweat. Later that evening, Franklin sat in his luxurious suite, poring over the staff files Arthur had provided. Anthony's was near the top, a flimsy cover story about his bartending experience. Franklin snorted. It was almost too easy. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Arthur, looking nervous. "Mr. Browning, I hope I'm not disturbing you. But after our conversation earlier, I did some digging. It seems there are some irregularities with a few of our employees' backgrounds, particularly the bartender you noticed." Franklin leaned back in his chair, expression neutral. "Is that so? Tell me more, Mr. McCarty." Arthur shifted uncomfortably. "Well, sir, it appears Mr. Levine may have exaggerated his qualifications, and there are some gaps in his employment history that don't add up." "I see," Franklin said slowly. "And what do you recommend we do about this, Mr. McCarty?" Arthur straightened, seeming relieved to be on familiar ground. "Standard procedure would be to suspend him pending a full investigation. If the discrepancies are confirmed, termination would be the next step." Franklin nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "Let's hold off on that for now, Mr. McCarty. I have a feeling Mr. Levine might have some interesting information to share. Keep this to yourself for the moment. I'll handle it personally." Arthur looked uncertain but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Browning, whatever you think is best." As Arthur left, Franklin turned to look out the window at the moonlit beach. Everything was falling into place. Anthony was working a dead-end job, clearly struggling, which meant Stella couldn't be far behind. Franklin's lips curved into a cold smile. It was time to spring the trap. The next evening, Franklin made his way to the resort's main restaurant. He'd chosen a table with a clear view of the entrance, ordered a bottle of expensive wine, and settled in to wait. He didn't have to wait long. Just as his main course arrived, he saw her. Stella walked in, and Franklin felt a jolt of satisfaction. She looked tired, her designer clothes from 2 years ago now looking slightly shabby. The glowing, carefree woman who'd left him was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate. Stella froze when she spotted Franklin, her eyes widening in shock. She recovered quickly, though, stalking over to his table with a look of fury on her face. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low but intense. Franklin leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Good evening to you too, Stella. You're looking, well." Stella's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me, Franklin. What are you doing in Bora Bora?" Franklin took a sip of his wine, savoring the moment. "Oh, didn't you hear? I own this place now. Well, part of it anyway. Funny how things work out, isn't it?" The color drained from Stella's face. "You, what?" Before Franklin could respond, Anthony appeared at Stella's side. He puffed out his chest, trying to look intimidating despite his bartender's uniform. "Listen, man, you can't just—" Franklin cut him off, his voice sharp as a knife. "Actually, I can. Anthony, consider this your termination notice. Effective immediately." Anthony's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Stella's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "We'll fight you." Franklin stood, his voice low but firm. "This is karma for you both. Get lost now, or I'll have security escort you out." As if on cue, 2 large security guards appeared nearby, watching the scene carefully. Stella grabbed Anthony's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "This isn't over, Franklin," she hissed. "You'll regret this." Franklin watched them go, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Now, the real game could begin. As he signaled for the check, Franklin's phone buzzed. It was a text from Susan. How did it go? Franklin allowed himself a small smile as he typed his reply. Perfectly. They never saw it coming. He pocketed his phone and stepped out into the warm night air. The stars twinkled overhead, and the sound of the ocean filled his ears. Franklin took a deep breath, savoring the moment. For 2 years, he'd worked tirelessly towards this goal. He'd rebuilt his life, created a revolutionary product, and positioned himself perfectly for revenge. But this was just the beginning. Stella and Anthony thought they could break him and walk away unscathed. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Franklin Browning was no longer the naive, trusting man they'd betrayed. He was stronger now, harder, and he was just getting started. As he walked back to his suite, Franklin's mind raced with plans. He had them exactly where he wanted them, desperate, angry, and ready to make mistakes. All he had to do now was wait for them to play into his hands. The game was on, and Franklin intended to win, no matter the cost. The week following Franklin's dramatic confrontation with Stella and Anthony was tense. The resort buzzed with whispers and sidelong glances. Franklin could feel the weight of countless eyes on him as he moved through the property, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. Stella and Anthony, for their part, were not content to slink away in defeat. They began a campaign of whispered insinuations and outright lies, targeting both staff and guests. Their goal was clear: undermine Franklin's authority and paint him as unstable and unfit to run the resort. "I heard he had a mental breakdown," Stella confided to a group of wealthy guests by the pool. "That's why he suddenly bought into this place. He's not right in the head." Anthony, meanwhile, focused on the staff. He cornered a young housekeeper in a secluded hallway, his voice low and urgent. "Browning's going to run this place into the ground. He doesn't know the first thing about hospitality. We'll all be out of jobs within a month." The rumors spread like wildfire. Franklin could see the uncertainty in the eyes of the staff, the wary glances from guests. He knew he had to act fast to regain control of the narrative. On Friday morning, Franklin called an all-staff meeting in the resort's largest conference room. As employees filed in, he stood at the front, projecting an aura of calm confidence. Once everyone was seated, he began. "Good morning, everyone. I know there have been some interesting stories circulating this past week," Franklin said, a wry smile playing on his lips. "I thought it was time we addressed them head-on." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Yes, I'm new to the hospitality industry. Yes, I made my fortune in water filtration technology. And yes, I have a personal history with 2 individuals who were, until recently, employed here." A murmur ran through the crowd. Franklin held up a hand, silencing them. "But I'm not here to air dirty laundry or settle old scores. I'm here because I believe in the potential of this resort, and in each and every one of you." Franklin's voice grew passionate as he outlined his vision for the future. He spoke of sustainability initiatives that would set them apart from competitors. He detailed plans for community involvement, for making the resort not just a retreat for the wealthy, but a vital part of the local economy. "I know change can be scary," Franklin said, his tone softening, "but I'm not here to sweep in and upend everything. I'm here to work with all of you to make this resort the best it can be. My door is always open. If you have concerns, ideas, or just want to chat, don't hesitate to come see me." As the meeting concluded, Franklin could see a shift in the room. The wariness was fading, replaced by cautious optimism. He'd won the first battle, but he knew the war was far from over. Over the next few days, Franklin threw himself into the work of running the resort. He was everywhere, helping in the kitchens, assisting guests, even pitching in with the groundskeeping. The staff watched in amazement as their new boss, The man they'd been told was unstable and incompetent demonstrated a keen understanding of every aspect of the operation. Franklin also began implementing the eco-friendly practices he'd promised. New, more efficient air conditioning systems were installed. Water-saving devices were fitted in every room. Solar panels began to appear on rooftops. The results were immediate and impressive. Within a month, the resort's utility costs had dropped by 30%. Guests raved about the resort's commitment to sustainability, and bookings began to surge. Arthur McCarty, the resort manager, couldn't hide his amazement. "Mr. Browning," he said one evening, shaking his head in wonder, "I've never seen anything like this. The staff morale is through the roof, guests are happier than ever, and we're saving a fortune on operating costs." "How did you do it?" Franklin allowed himself a small smile. "It's simple, Arthur. I listened to the people who know this place best, you and your staff, and I applied a little ingenuity. That's all." As word of the resort's transformation spread, Franklin received a call from Gilbert Guerrero. "Franklin, my boy," the CEO boomed, "you've outdone yourself. The board is thrilled. We're thinking of implementing your methods across all our properties." Franklin's success was a bitter pill for Stella and Anthony. Their attempts to undermine him had backfired spectacularly, leaving them more desperate than ever. As they sat in their dingy rented apartment, Stella's face was a mask of fury. "This can't be happening," she seethed. "That pathetic loser was supposed to crash and burn, not become some kind of hospitality genius." Anthony paced the small living room, his expression dark. "We need to do something more drastic. Something he can't talk his way out of." Stella's eyes lit up with a malicious gleam. "What about the resort's computer system? If we could mess with the reservations, create some chaos." Anthony nodded slowly, a grin spreading across his face. "I like the way you think, babe. I've got a buddy who's good with computers. Maybe he could help us out." What they didn't know was that Franklin had anticipated just such a move. He'd worked closely with the IT department to set up a sophisticated honeypot trap designed to catch anyone attempting to breach the system. For 3 days, Stella and Anthony worked with their hacker friend, believing they were causing havoc with the resort's bookings. They imagined the chaos that would ensue: double-booked rooms, lost reservations, angry guests. Surely this would be the final nail in Franklin's coffin. On the 4th day, they gathered in their apartment to celebrate their perceived victory. Stella poured cheap champagne into plastic cups, her eyes gleaming with malicious glee. To the downfall of Franklin Browning, she toasted, raising her cup. Anthony clinked his cup against hers. "And to us, baby. We'll be running that place before you know it." Their celebration was cut short by a sharp knock at the door. Anthony frowned, setting down his drink. Who the hell could that be? He opened the door to find 2 burly security guards from the resort, accompanied by a stern-looking police officer. "Stella Browning and Anthony Levine," the officer asked, his voice clipped and professional. Stella appeared behind Anthony, her face pale. "Yes? What's this about?" The officer's expression remained impassive. "You're under arrest for attempted cybercrimes against the Bora Bora Luxury Resort." As the reality of the situation sank in, Stella's composure cracked. She whirled on Anthony, her eyes wild with panic. "You said this would work. You promised we'd get rid of him." Anthony could only shrug helplessly as the officer read them their rights, and the security guards moved in to handcuff them. As they were led away, Stella caught a glimpse of a familiar figure standing in the shadows, Franklin, watching the scene unfold with a look of grim satisfaction. In that moment, she realized the full extent of her mistake. She hadn't just underestimated Franklin. She'd created a formidable enemy out of a man who had once loved her unconditionally. The following week, as the sun began to set over the crystal-clear waters of Bora Bora, Franklin stood on the beach, letting the warm sand sift through his toes. The past 2 years had been a whirlwind of pain, determination, and finally, triumph. Now, as he watched the sky turn a brilliant orange, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. A familiar voice broke into his reverie. "Penny for your thoughts?" Franklin turned to see Susan Chan walking towards him, a warm smile on her face. He'd invited her to Bora Bora to celebrate his success, and her presence felt like the final piece of a complex puzzle falling into place. "I was just thinking about how everything turned out," Franklin said, returning her smile. "It's hard to believe, isn't it?" Susan nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It really is. Are you okay, Franklin? I mean, with everything that's happened." Franklin took a deep breath, considering her question. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. "You know what? I really am. I lost something I thought was important, but I gained so much more. My work is making a difference, and I've learned what real loyalty looks like." He turned to Susan, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for sticking by me through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." Susan's smile widened. "That's what friends are for, Franklin." "So, what's next for Franklin Browning, resort owner and environmental revolutionary?" Franklin chuckled, his mind already racing with possibilities. "I'm thinking expansion. There's a whole world out there that could use our help, and this time, I'm not letting anyone hold me back." As they walked along the beach, the resort gleaming behind them, Franklin felt a sense of closure. He'd not just survived betrayal, he'd thrived in spite of it. The future, for once, looked brighter than ever. They paused, watching as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon. Franklin turned to Susan, suddenly aware of how right it felt to have her by his side. "You know, Susan," he said, his voice soft but confident, "I've been thinking. We've been such a great team, both professionally and personally. Would you like to grab dinner sometime? Not as colleagues, but maybe something more?" Susan's eyes lit up, a blend of surprise and joy dancing across her features. "I thought you'd never ask, Franklin." "I'd love to." As they continued their walk, hand in hand, Franklin marveled at the twists and turns his life had taken. He'd lost a wife, but gained a true partner. He'd been betrayed, but found the strength to rise above it. His work was changing the world, and he'd found someone who truly appreciated and supported his vision. Franklin realized that sometimes, losing what you thought you wanted could lead you to what you truly needed. With Susan by his side and his innovative ideas changing the world, he'd finally found his true path to happiness and success. As they strolled back towards the resort, the first stars twinkling overhead, Franklin felt a surge of excitement for the future. He'd weathered the storm, emerged stronger, and now the world was full of possibilities. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he was ready to face them, not alone, but with someone who truly understood and valued him. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead been the catalyst for his greatest triumphs. Franklin Browning had not just survived, he had conquered. And the best was yet to come.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I was nervous. Kathy, my wife of 11 years, had told me to meet her at the Tumbleweed Inn at 3 o'clock. I knew that the bar would be pretty much empty at that hour, and whatever it was she had to tell me would have little to do with partying with her. I didn't know how right I was. The TI was where she and I had met 13 years before. I had a bad feeling. I had suspected that she was cheating on me with a coworker. I was afraid that this meeting would be where I got the news. There had been signs. Late nights at the office where she was a secretary to the boss. Disinterest in sex, at least with me. New clothes, provocative clothes, in her closet. Clothes she never wore around me. And, much reduced, interest in communicating with me. We hardly spoke even at meals, fewer and fewer of which she was ever even home for. During the past several months, it had been mostly me and the kids eating and her coming in with some lame excuse and perhaps a dessert from the market for the children. Max 9 and Megan 10. Her disregard for me was one thing, and it hurt, but her putting the children on the back burner really pissed me off. There were but few cars in the lot when I pulled into the TI. I had resolved to play it cool if she was going to do and say what I suspected was the case. I suspected a tell-all due to a conversation that I had partially overheard 2 nights before. Yes, okay. I agree. Tuesday, yes. I'll get him there. Well, it was Tuesday, and it was 3 o'clock, and she had gotten me here. I sat in the car for a few moments thinking, what if she was with the a-hole? What should I do? The advice my dad had laid on me years before came to me. They had served me well more than once in my business. Do nothing, son, unless you know what to do. Say nothing. Let your antagonist figure it out. The less you say, the more he will worry. And if he doesn't worry, then he is vulnerable, and you can make plans to take care of things at a date and time of your choosing. Remember, if you open your mouth, they will know what you're thinking immediately, even if you don't realize it. Just shut up and walk away. Take care of business later after you have all of the facts and your plans are in place. I smiled. God, how I had loved that man. I knew he was watching over me at that very minute. I said a silent prayer of thanks for his advice. Inside, I saw her sitting at the bar with a man I didn't recognize. But that was not a big surprise. My company, Steinbeck Incorporated, which I had founded 10 years ago, claimed all of my time during the day, and I had little opportunity to mix with the folks at her place of work. I was an electrical engineer, and my company designed wiring and other electrical schema for a full dozen construction companies needing the services I could provide. I walked over to the two of them. She sensed my presence and turned. "Hello, Ben," she said. Not "hello, honey." No peck on the cheek, just "hello, Ben." "Hi, honey," I said, and I said it pointedly. "What's up?" The man turned and faced me. "Mr. Steinbeck, or would you prefer I call you Ben? We brought you here today to let you know that your wife and I have been having sex together for some time. She has made it clear that she is tired of sneaking around and having to make excuses, so I convinced her to just simply tell you. As I have said, I was halfway prepared for this, and the recorder in my jacket pocket gave me an edge. I hoped I was getting it all. I waited. I said nothing. After all, Dad was watching, and I didn't want him mad at me for being stupid. "Ben?" said Kathy, waiting for me to say something, but I remained silent. She must have decided I was in shock or something, so she started talking. "Ben, it has been so hard keeping this from you. I don't want you to feel hurt. I have no intention of leaving you. It's just, well, sex with Jason here is just too much for me to give up. I hope you can understand. I just can't keep this from you any longer." "You deserve to know," she said. I wasn't sure just how aware she was of how stupid her argument sounded. Kathy had not finished college, for obvious reasons, but I had never considered her actually dumb until that moment. As for the military genius she was trading me in for, well, enough said. I walked to the end of the bar where the barkeep was trying not to hear what he couldn't help but hear. I ordered what was on tap. He brought it. I sipped it, saying nothing. The two of them watched me. I could see confusion on both of their faces. I finished my beer and left. I could feel their eyes following me as I exited the building. I felt good. For the first time in months, I felt that I had the upper hand. I might have been imagining it, but it was definitely how I was feeling. I went directly home. The kids would be waiting for me. I kissed the kids hello and laughed and told them it was going to be a good weekend for them. They yelled and cheered, and we went to get ice cream, and I told them of my plan, which I had formulated earlier that day. They would be staying with their Aunt Susan and Uncle Dak for the weekend. They loved my sister and brother-in-law, and they them. Sue and her husband, an ex-Army Ranger, had been unable to conceive. Hence, Max and Megan had become their favorite people in the whole wide world. I knew that Sue and Dak were going camping for the weekend, and now the kids were going to be going with them. That would give me the chance I needed to handle the things that had to be handled. "Everything okay, Ben?" said Dak. The man had an uncanny knack for picking up on things. "Truthfully, no," I said. "I'm divorcing Kathy. The kids don't know, so." "I figured," he said. That brought me up short. "What?" "I've noticed some things," he said. "So has Sue. Kathy actually made a play for me last Christmas. I blew her off, and she made a joke about it, trying to cover herself, but she couldn't sell it. Not to me. Sue made me not tell you. Sorry I didn't now. It's okay. I'm just grateful you guys are here to take care of the kids for a couple of days. I need time to get my ducks all lined up. Listen, Ben, if you need me for anything..." "Thanks, Dak. I'll keep it in mind. But I think I can handle this. It'll be messy, but I have evidence, and this is not a no-fault state, so nailing the a-hole shouldn't be a problem. After I leave here, I'm heading over to Henry's to get things underway." Henry Morgan was my company's more than competent attorney. He was by all accounts at least 120 years old, but still sharp as a razor blade. He knew every judge and every worthwhile attorney in the state, let alone in the city. Kathy couldn't have not realized what I was capable of doing if I found her cheating. I figured she had come forward with all of this, having someone else in her life, to get ahead of anything I might do if I found out on my own. It was very faulty reasoning, but the more I considered it, the more it made the only possible sense. She was scared I would find out and sandbag her. Well, I was going to do just that. Yeah, Henry, that's about it. I had shown up at his place unannounced and caught him by surprise. I gave him the recording and the name of the bartender who had witnessed the strange meeting between my wife and the other man just hours earlier. Okay, I will have them both served on Monday. Are you going home? He asked. Yes, I guess so. I don't want to tip her too soon. I will be kicking her out as soon as you tell me they've been served. Okay, Malcolm will interview the witness and get him to sign an affidavit tomorrow even though it's Sunday. Speed wins in this business. Hit him hard, hit him fast, and leave him bewildered and scrambling. I always say, he said. I like the way this man thought. And Ben? Yes, I said. Sorry about your marriage, and especially about Max and Megan. Anything you need? Thanks, Henry. I appreciate it. I left feeling very, very good. I had an ex-ranger and a real nasty lawyer running point. Now all I had to do was sit back and let the shit hit the fan. I had told Henry to deny her anything whatsoever. She was to get nothing. He said it wouldn't be a problem. With any other lawyer, I knew, I would probably have to give her half of everything, but her actions, as proved by the recording, according to Henry, would give him the leverage to crush her in court. If Henry said it, it was true. That was something I knew to be absolutely certain. I was feeling better and better as I drove home for possibly the last weekend I would be spending with my soon-to-be ex-wife. Arriving home, I was shocked to see a strange car in the driveway. It had to be Jason's. It was getting dark. I wondered if I would be lucky enough to get a pic or two of the lovers. I parked a couple of houses down and snuck up to the house as unobtrusively as I could. The lights were out. As I neared the house, I saw Rex Stottlemyre, my next-door neighbor, pulling the trash out to the curb. Rex was a cop. I stood directly beside the strange car and looked at him. He saw me and waved. I nodded. He'd seen the car. I was glad. It was yet another witness. I noted the a-hole's plate number. I would give it to Henry tomorrow along with Rex's name and address, and maybe a couple of pics if I could get him. I entered the backyard as though going to get my trash bins to bring them out. Rex had gone back in by then, so I could still try and sneak in and get my pics. They were in the front room. I pulled out my cell and shot them through the sliding glass doors at the back. Thank God for modern cell phones. He was banging her from behind while she knelt on the couch. I got about 10 pictures, put away my cell, and entered noisily through the sliding glass door. They heard me. The two turned, looked at me, and continued doing what they were doing. I went upstairs. The nerve. I thought. I seethed, but I waited. About 15 minutes later, I heard the front door downstairs open and close and then the roar of the a-hole's engines as he drove off. I waited for a minute or two more, and then went back downstairs heading for the kitchen. I heard the shower running as I passed the downstairs bathroom. I poured myself a cup of coffee and waited. This was going to be interesting. 10 minutes later she came and joined me. You okay? She asked. Her voice was kind. I didn't say anything. I just sipped the coffee and waited for her to say something meaningful. It concerned me that she didn't even think to ask after the kids. This woman was not the woman I had married more than a decade past. Ben, we have to talk, she said. The kids are at my sister's, I said. Thought you might like to know. What? Oh, yes, I noticed they weren't here when I got home, she said. She looked flustered now. Look, are you okay? I just wanted to be upfront and honest with you. I didn't like sneaking around. You're a good man, and you deserve better. It's just sex, Ben. Only sex? I will deny you nothing when we are together, and Jason knows that and is okay with it. He's a good man. It was his idea not to hide things from you anymore. I couldn't resist. Sorry, Dad. Damn nice of him, I said. No need to be sarcastic, Ben. Honesty is always the best policy, you know, she said. She actually said that. Evidently breaking her wedding vows was an exception to the rule. I had to smile. I couldn't help it. Ben, damn it. Say something, she commanded. What do you want me to say? If I said to call him and tell him it's over, would you? Well, then there is nothing to say. I'm a cuck and obviously a spineless man, and that's that, I said. I was laughing my butt off inside, but my outward demeanor was calm, even reflective. You're not a cuck or whatever, or a spineless man, she said. You're my husband and a good daddy and I love you and… Save it, Kathy. I'm going out. Don't wait up for me. I had to get out of there. I couldn't stand to be near her. She was dead to me. By Monday, it would all be over, and she would be out of my life for good. I retraced my steps of earlier in the day. I was back at the Tumbleweed and the same barkeep was on duty. I bellied up and took my place at the end of the bar. The place was crowded now, especially for a Tuesday night. I ordered a tap and asked the guy, "What gives?" I said, indicating the crowd. "Ladies' night, and the wolves are out." He nodded toward the far corner. The lighting was dim, but I saw him. Jason was making out with one of the ladies. So, the cheater was cheating on the other cheater. Why was I not surprised? Or, Maybe he wasn't cheating on the other cheater. Maybe the other cheater knew he had other interests. I overheard that shit earlier today, man. If you need a witness. Thanks. Maybe I will, I said. My wife pulled that shit on me too a few years ago, but I didn't have anybody to stand with me. So I got rimmed pretty bad in court. Gotta keep this place though. So that was something, I guess. It'd actually be good if half of what I make didn't go to alimony. We talked off and on for the next 4 hours straight. I made a mental note to talk to Henry about maybe getting this guy some justice if he helped me nail Romeo and Juliet. Us scumsuckers had to stick together. Jason never noticed me at the bar. I had managed to get some good shots of him and his little chickie. I would use them to show my wife if indeed she thought she was exclusive with him. But that would have to wait till after the big show on Monday. I got home around 4 in the morning. Josh, the barkeep, and I had had a half-dozen cups of Joe after closing. He lived upstairs from the bar, and so he had nowhere to go. And since he was living alone, I guess I was a good candidate for late-night conversation. I liked the guy. Plus, he was a damn good bartender, a major plus in my view. I was pissed at Kathy, but I wanted to sleep in my bed, not in the damn guest room. There's something about a man's own bed. It's something that my wife knew about me, and that might be why she'd have sex in front room instead upstairs. I slid in beside her. She was awake. I felt her hand reach for me. I jerked it off me and just rolled over and slept. She evidently did the same. The light streaming in through the cracks between the window curtains woke me. It was almost 8 o'clock. I could smell bacon frying in the kitchen. I got up, showered, dressed, and went downstairs. She was in a good mood. I guess she thought that everything was all right, or at least that our marriage was not terminal. "Hi, sleepyhead," she said. "Morning," I said. "Smells good." Well, it did. I was hungry. It might be the last day of our married life, but I didn't have to be all mopey about it. The shit would hit the fan tomorrow, but today was going to be a good day. I just knew it. "I'll be here all day today for you," she said. She said it like it was a special favor to me since I was being so reasonable. "Oh, yes. And if you're good, you might get really lucky," she said. She was actually giggling. I didn't know whether to laugh or be sick to my stomach. How could this cheating of a wife actually think that I would consciously accept what she was selling? I just giggled back at her. "I have to take my car into the shop later this morning," I said. "Have to have new brakes put on." "Oh, I thought we might." "Maybe later," I said. I had to figure a way to avoid her, and it wasn't going to be easy. I really didn't want to stick my wick in her, but I supposed I could endure it if I absolutely had to keep her off balance. Just before leaving to get the brake job, which incidentally had not been a lie, I hid my little voice-activated recorder near the kitchen phone. I figured if she called him, that would be the phone she'd use. I was right. God, how I loved the intrigue. 3 hours later, I was back. I retrieved the recorder while she was taking the trash out, and I went into my office to hear what might have been caught on it. It was hurtful when I heard her say she loved him. Mighty hurtful. It was especially so since I knew he didn't give a damn about her. I couldn't wait to show her the dated pics I got of him and his chickie the night before. That would put a crimp in her style. "Hi, it's me." "Yes. He's gone out to work on the car." Giggle. "Yes, your advice really helped." "I don't know. Jason. He might not wanna." Yes, I'll try. He cares about me, so maybe, but, okay. I understand. I just don't want to lose him. I don't know. Maybe we push too hard. I know, but, okay, bye. I love you too." I sat there in my office, feeling bewildered. How had I ended up marrying someone so foolish? It was embarrassing. I wasn't even sure if I should go through with the divorce. Could someone that clueless really be held accountable for their actions? No, the pain was too deep. The blatant disrespect shown by both of them made any chance of reconciliation impossible. And then there were the kids. It was clear she didn't care about them at all. Unforgivable. I couldn't avoid her. However, I just rolled over to my side and slept. I was up and out of the house before she even awoke the next morning. It was Monday, and soon it would be the living end for her and her lover. I first went to the office to let my secretary, Elsbeth, know I would be out for the rest of the day. Being the boss had its upside. First stop was Henry's office. He had news. Malcolm, his part-time PI, had gotten some stuff per Romeo. He was married, had 6 kids, believe it or not, and his wife had the money in the family. A housefrau 10 years his senior, she apparently had no clue as to his philanderings. I instructed Henry to take him down big time, and also gave him my latest recording in my cell with the pics. He smiled at that. I also mentioned to him that I might have a special job for him and Malcolm after the dust settled. I knew that Sue and Dak would get the kids off to school. It was having to talk to them later in the day that was scaring me. But there was nothing for it. It had to be done. Henry had set it up for the two a-holes to be served at work. There was a restraining order against her coming back to the house, and against him as well. The papers were set to be delivered just before lunchtime. I asked Henry to make sure it done as loud and with as much fanfare as possible. I wanted the two lovers to hurt. Also, I had asked that he make any and all evidence against the pair available to Jason's wife. What she did with it would be up to her. God, how I wanted to be there when my wife was served. And then I thought, why not? I was in the hall when the server arrived. I didn't know him, and he didn't know me, so he just walked right past me to the office where my wife worked, the boss's office. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Kathy Steinbeck?" he said. "Why, yes, I am," she said, smiling. I was watching from the doorway, and she didn't see me at first since she was turned to speak with the server. He handed her a manila envelope. "You're served," he said. Her face clouded. She looked at the envelope she held in her hand and opened it. She paled and began to cry, then sob. She fell into her chair. Her boss at that moment was coming out, saw, and tried to console her. I made myself more visible. She saw me and her eyes shot open. "Ben, why?" I couldn't resist. "Sorry again, Dad. You can't be serious, Kathy. You have to be the world's biggest moron," I said, and I walked out. I wasn't present, but I heard later that Jason had been served in like fashion. He actually fainted as the realization that his life was essentially over sunk in. He eventually lost everything. Wife, kids, house, job, everything. I had been wrong about one thing. Kathy was not the world's biggest moron. She was only the second biggest. A few days later I sat in Henry's office and sipped the hot brew. "So, do you think you can help him since it's so long after the fact?" I said. "Yes, I think so. The lady has a lot of skeletons in her closet, and she is more than willing to revisit the conditions of their divorce in order to keep them hush-hush," he said. "Get the alimony dumped," I said. "I mean, if you can." "Ben, don't you know by now that I can do anything?" He laughed. "I stand corrected," I said, joining him in laughing. Late that day I sat at the bar in the Tumbleweed talking with my new friend. "Jesus," he said, "if what you say is true, you will never have to pay for another tap in here again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, especially since she rubbed my nose in it so bad at the time." "Glad I could help," I said. Kathy ended up with nothing from our marriage, but miracle of miracles, she was not fired. She'd been with her boss for so long that he let her indiscretion slide this once. Jason was history as previously related. I met with Kathy the day after the big show. I had something I wanted to give her. I knew I risked having to listen to her beg and plead, but this one was worth that risk. "Ben, isn't there some way? I mean the children." That was a card I knew she was going to play, and I shot her down. "You have shown no interest in the children in months, Kathy. That boyfriend of yours has had your full attention," I said. "Ben, he's a good man. He's like you in so many ways. I think that's why I fell for him in the first place. He loves me too. That's why we tried so hard to make you understand. It was for you that we bared our hearts and souls. Now you have seen fit to destroy us, all of us, even the children. How could you?" The tears came again. This time she had really pissed me off, making it all my fault. God, I was mad. "Ben, it's not too late. There's still an us if you want it. I know I can make Jason understand that you have needs too. You'll still be my number one. You're the father of my children. How could you ever be otherwise? Jason is outside of us, not part of us. I will make you a very happy man if you only give me the chance." I was almost speechless. I couldn't even get mad. This was beyond dumb, stupid, moronic. She actually believed her tripe. She needed help, but somebody else was going to have to provide it. She was history to me. "Kathy, I came here today to see you for two reasons. One, I am going to allow you unrestricted visitation with the children, but never your lovers. I am going to give you some money to get you into a new starter apartment, but then you will have to fend for yourself. The condition for this largesse on my part is that you do not in any way contest the divorce. If you do, I will come at you with everything I have. And, Kathy, you have no idea what I am capable of. Am I clear so far?" She stared at me. It was clear she had hoped against hope that I would take her back, and that I would be okay with her keeping on with world-class moron number one. Like I say, she was going to need help. Number two are these. I pushed manila folder toward her. "Please check the dates at the bottom of the photographs," I said. They were the photos I'd taken Saturday night of Jason and his chickie. She pulled them out and stared. "But these are from last Saturday night. You are not his true love. You never were. He's a player. Have a nice life," I said. I rose, threw a 20 on the table for the waitress, and left. She was shedding the tears of the despairing as I exited the building. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Hey, welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. We've got a brand new story lined up for you today, and we're thrilled to have you here. We hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Mike Thompson stood in his garage, methodically packing his fishing gear for the weekend trip. At 38, he still had the enthusiasm of a boy when it came to these outings with his high school buddies. 15 years as a postal worker had given him an appreciation for order, and it showed in the careful way he arranged his tackle box. He hummed contentedly, picking up his favorite fishing rod, a gleaming beauty Rachel had given him for their anniversary 3 years ago. The weight of it in his hands brought a smile to his face. It was moments like these, surrounded by the familiar scent of motor oil and grass clippings, that Mike felt truly at peace. The garage door was slightly ajar, letting in a warm breeze and, unknowingly to Mike, creating an unintended audio channel to the kitchen. As he reached for his cooler, Rachel's voice drifted clearly from the house. "He's gone for the weekend. You can come over for a wild night." Mike's hand froze on the cooler's handle. The words hung in the air, as tangible as the fishing lures scattered across his workbench. For a moment, he thought he must have misheard. Rachel, his wife of 12 years, couldn't possibly. But as the implications of what he'd heard sank in, Mike's mind began racing, connecting dots he'd subconsciously noticed but dismissed over the past few months. Rachel's new clothes, the late nights at work, her sudden interest in going to the gym. Each memory now took on a sinister new meaning. Mike forced himself to take a deep breath. His hand shook slightly as he continued packing, every movement now a conscious effort to appear normal. The fishing trip, which had been the focus of his excitement all week, now seemed like a distant, unimportant thing. With the car loaded, Mike steeled himself and entered the house. Rachel was in the kitchen, phone nowhere in sight, looking for all the world like the loving wife he'd always believed her to be. "All packed, honey?" she asked, smiling up at him. Mike nodded, forcing a smile of his own. "Yeah, just about. Just need to grab my toiletries." He leaned in to kiss her goodbye, and as their lips met, Mike tasted the lie. The familiar scent of her perfume now seemed cloying, suffocating. He pulled away, maintaining his facade with effort. "Have a great time," Rachel said, squeezing his arm affectionately. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too," Mike replied, the words feeling hollow in his mouth. "Love you." As he drove away, Mike watched Rachel in the rearview mirror. She stood on the porch, waving, the perfect picture of a devoted wife. But even as he turned the corner, he saw her reaching for her phone again, no doubt to continue the conversation he'd interrupted. Mike's mind was in turmoil as he drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Instead of heading to the lake where his friends were waiting, he found himself pulling into a secluded spot with a clear view of their house. He put the car in park and sat back, his heart pounding. What was he doing? Part of him screamed to confront Rachel, to demand answers. Another part insisted this was all a misunderstanding, that there must be an innocent explanation. But the cold, logical part of his brain, the part that had made him an efficient postal worker for 15 years, knew better. So Mike waited, his fishing gear untouched in the back of the car, his eyes fixed on the house he'd called home for over a decade. The house where, at that very moment, his wife was preparing to betray him. Dusk fell over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses. Mike sat vigil in his car, his body stiff from hours of inactivity, his mind a whirlpool of emotions. He'd texted his friends, making up an excuse about a family emergency. They'd been disappointed but understanding. If only they knew the real emergency unfolding. At 8:43 p.m., a red sports car turned onto their street. Mike's stomach churned as he recognized it. Steve's car. Steve, Rachel's co-worker of 2 years. Steve, who'd been to their barbecues, who'd complimented Mike on his grilling skills. Steve, who was now confidently approaching the front door of Mike's house to sleep with Mike's wife. With shaking hands, Mike pulled out his phone and started recording. The porch light illuminated Steve's face clearly as Rachel opened the door, the two of them exchanging a brief hug before Steve disappeared inside. Mike zoomed in, making sure to capture every detail. He felt sick, but he kept recording. As the night wore on, Mike documented the telling dance of lights in the house. At 9:15 p.m., the living room lights dimmed. Mike imagined them sitting on the couch he and Rachel had picked out together, sharing a bottle of wine, laughing at inside jokes. At 9:30 p.m., the bedroom lights came on. Mike's heart clenched. That was their bedroom, where he and Rachel had spent countless nights talking, laughing, making love. Now, it was the scene of her betrayal. Throughout the night, the bathroom light flicked on and off periodically. Each time it did, it felt like a dagger to Mike's heart. He remained resolutely in his car, fighting waves of nausea and the overwhelming urge to storm into the house and confront them. At 11:52 p.m., movement in the backyard caught Mike's attention. His breath caught in his throat as he saw Rachel and Steve making their way to the hot tub. The hot tub Mike had installed as a surprise for their 10th anniversary. He zoomed in with his phone, his hands steady despite the turmoil in his heart, capturing damning evidence of their intimacy. As the night wore on, Mike battled exhaustion and conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to close his eyes, to pretend this was all a bad dream, but he knew the importance of what he was doing. Each photo, each video was a piece of evidence, a shield against the lies he knew would come. At some point, despite his best efforts, Mike dozed off. He jolted awake at 5:17 a.m., momentarily disoriented. Then he saw Steve's furtive exit from the house, and reality came crashing back. Mike raised his phone, recording Steve's walk of shame back to his red sports car. As Steve drove away, Mike sat in his car, feeling hollow. The night's vigil had left him drained, both physically and emotionally. But as the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon, a new emotion began to take root in Mike's heart. It wasn't just sadness or betrayal anymore. It was determination. Determination to protect himself, to seek justice, to take control of the situation Rachel had thrust upon him. With a deep breath, Mike started his car. He had a long drive ahead of him, both literally and figuratively. But for now, he had a fishing trip to fake and evidence to secure. Sunday evening found Mike pulling into his driveway, his fishing gear untouched, his mind a battleground of emotions. As he cut the engine, he saw Rachel come out onto the porch, a smile on her face that now seemed like a grotesque mask to Mike. "Hey, honey," she called, walking over to greet him with a hug. How was the trip? As Rachel's arms encircled him, Mike caught the faint scent of an unfamiliar cologne clinging to her skin. His stomach turned, but he managed to return the hug, forcing a tired smile. "It was good," he lied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "Caught a few nice ones. How about you? Have a quiet weekend?" Rachel nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Mike now recognized as a tell when she was lying. "Oh, just caught up on some reading, did a bit of cleaning. Nothing exciting." Mike listened as Rachel recounted her quiet weekend at home, each lie stoking the fire of his resolve. He nodded at appropriate intervals, asking the occasional question, all while cataloging the inconsistencies. There was a wine glass in the sink, though Rachel claimed she hadn't had a drink. The hot tub cover was slightly askew, despite Rachel insisting she hadn't used it. That night, as they lay in bed, Mike found himself unable to sleep. The weight of Rachel's betrayal pressed down on him, made all the more unbearable by her peaceful breathing beside him. In the dark, with only the soft glow of the alarm clock for company, Mike began to plan. He started a mental log of Rachel's activities, noting times, dates, and coincidences with Steve's schedule. Tomorrow, he'd start documenting everything. He'd need evidence, cold, hard facts that couldn't be denied or explained away. Over the next week, Mike threw himself into his plan with the same meticulous attention to detail that made him an excellent postal worker. He volunteered for overtime shifts, explaining to Rachel that it was for a special surprise. Her eyes had lit up at that, and Mike had to swallow back a surge of bitterness. If only she knew. In reality, each extra hour worked went into a secret account Mike opened at a different bank. He knew he'd need resources for what was to come, and he wasn't about to let Rachel's betrayal leave him financially vulnerable as well. At home, Mike started paying more attention to their teenage daughter, Emma. He noticed her confusion at Rachel's frequent absences, the hurt in her eyes when her mother missed another soccer game. Mike's heart ached for Emma, caught in the crossfire of her mother's selfishness. He began building a stronger bond with Emma, helping with her homework, and really listening when she talked about her day. They started having dinner together on the nights Rachel was working late. And Mike found himself treasuring these moments of genuine connection amidst the turmoil of his crumbling marriage. All the while, Mike carefully maintained his routine, giving Rachel no reason to suspect he knew about her infidelity. He kissed her goodbye in the mornings, asked about her day in the evenings, even initiated sex occasionally to avoid raising suspicion. Each act felt like a betrayal of his own integrity, but Mike knew it was necessary. He was building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for the storm to come. In quiet moments, when the weight of his knowledge threatened to overwhelm him, Mike reminded himself of what was at stake. This wasn't just about him and Rachel anymore. It was about Emma, about their future, about justice. And so, despite the pain, despite the anger and betrayal churning inside him, Mike pressed on. He documented credit card statements, showing Rachel's unusual purchases, lingerie she never wore for him, expensive restaurants she never mentioned. He created a secure email account to communicate with a divorce lawyer, laying out his situation in clear, unemotional terms. Mike spent hours researching Pennsylvania divorce laws, understanding the impact of infidelity on settlements. He was determined to be prepared, to protect himself and Emma from the fallout of Rachel's actions. As the days turned into weeks, Mike's plan took shape. He was no longer just Mike Thompson, unsuspecting husband and devoted father. He was becoming something else, a man with a mission, a silent storm gathering strength, preparing to unleash justice on those who had wronged him. The calm before the storm was coming to an end. Soon, very soon, Rachel would learn the consequences of her actions, and Mike would be ready. Mike Thompson's life had become a carefully orchestrated performance. To the outside world, he was still the same dependable postal worker, loving husband and devoted father. But behind the facade, a storm was brewing. Over the next month, Mike transformed into a silent detective in his own home. He noted Rachel's patterns with the precision of a scientist observing a specimen. Late nights at work conveniently fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Girls' nights out suspiciously coincided with the evenings when Steve's wife, Sarah, had her book club meetings. Mike's hand shook slightly as he installed a hidden camera in their living room. The new digital photo frame seemed innocuous enough, a thoughtful gift for Rachel to display their family photos. She had no idea that it was capturing her betrayal in high definition. The first time Mike watched footage of Rachel and Steve together in his own home, he felt physically ill. There they were, laughing on the couch he and Rachel had picked out together, sharing wine from the glasses they'd received as a wedding gift. The evidence was undeniable. Each video clipped another nail in the coffin of his marriage. In a twist of fate that Mike found grimly ironic, he found himself befriending Sarah, Steve's wife. Under the pretense of planning a surprise anniversary party for Rachel, Mike reached out to the unsuspecting woman. "Steve talks about you all the time." Sarah gushed over coffee one afternoon. "He says you're the best thing that ever happened to him." Mike nodded, forcing a smile as guilt gnawed at his insides. He was about to shatter this woman's world, just as his had been shattered. But the alternative, letting her live in blissful ignorance while her husband made a fool of her, seemed even crueler. At home, Mike noticed the toll Rachel's deception was taking on their daughter, Emma. The teenager's confusion was palpable, her hurt evident in the slump of her shoulders and the furrow of her brow. "Mom's been working so hard lately, Emma mentioned offhandedly one evening as Mike helped her with her math homework. "I hardly see her anymore." Mike's heart clenched. He wanted to tell Emma the truth, to protect her from the pain that was coming. Instead, he simply nodded and changed the subject. Later that week, while tidying up Emma's room, Mike found a report card tucked away in a drawer. Rachel's signature was conspicuously absent, the form forgotten in her web of lies and distractions. Determined to be the stable presence Emma needed, Mike intensified his bonding efforts with his daughter. He attended every one of her soccer games, noting with a mixture of sadness and anger Rachel's frequent absences. They started a tradition of Sunday morning hikes, giving Mike precious insight into Emma's thoughts and feelings. During one such hike, as they paused to admire a particularly beautiful vista, Emma turned to Mike with a vulnerability that made her seem much younger than her 15 years. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "is everything okay with you and Mom?" Mike's heart raced. He wanted to spill everything, to unburden himself to his daughter. But he knew it wasn't fair to put that weight on her shoulders. "Not yet. We're just going through a bit of a rough patch, sweetie," he said, pulling her into a hug. "But I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." As Emma nestled into his embrace, Mike felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Emma, for her future, for her right to trust and believe in love. With careful deliberation, Mike reached out to Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda. Over a casual dinner, he expressed concern about Rachel's behavior, hinting at potential issues without revealing the full extent of his knowledge. "I'm probably overreacting," he said, watching their faces carefully. "But I thought you should know. Maybe you could keep an eye out at the anniversary party." Tom and Linda exchanged worried glances. Mike could see the seeds of doubt he'd planted taking root. He asked them not to confront Rachel, suggesting they observe for themselves at the upcoming celebration. They agreed, their concern for their daughter evident in their furrowed brows and quiet sighs. As the weeks passed, Mike consulted with his lawyer about custody options. He learned about Pennsylvania's preference for shared custody, but his lawyer assured him that his meticulous documentation of Rachel's behavior and his own involvement in Emma's life would work in his favor. Mike threw himself into subtly documenting his role as a father. He saved every receipt from school supply shopping trips, took countless photos at Emma's events, and kept a detailed log of the time he spent helping with homework and school projects. Each piece of evidence was another sandbag in the levee he was building to protect his and Emma's future. As Mike's case against Rachel grew stronger, so did the storm brewing on the horizon. The calm facade he presented to the world belied the tempest of emotions roiling beneath the surface. Soon, very soon, the gathering storm would break. And when it did, Mike would be ready. Mike stood in the kitchen, a calendar in his hand and a forced smile on his face. "I've been thinking," he said to Rachel, who was absently scrolling through her phone. "Our 15th anniversary is coming up. We should do something special." Rachel looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. "Oh, what did you have in mind?" "A party," Mike said, his voice brimming with an enthusiasm he didn't feel. "A big celebration with all our friends and family. We've been through so much together. We should mark the occasion properly." Rachel's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That sounds nice. But isn't it a bit much? Maybe we could just have a quiet dinner, just the two of us." Mike shook his head, maintaining his cheerful facade. "Nonsense. 15 years is a big deal. We should celebrate with everyone we love." As Rachel reluctantly agreed, Mike could see the discomfort in her body language. It only fueled his determination. Over the next few weeks, Mike threw himself into party planning with suspicious enthusiasm. He booked a private room at the most upscale restaurant in town, a place known for its romantic ambience and exquisite cuisine. The irony wasn't lost on him. Invitations went out to family, friends, and co-workers, including Steve and Sarah. Mike took particular care with that invitation, making sure it was addressed to both of them, a subtle reminder of the vows Steve was betraying. "We have to invite your parents," Mike insisted when Rachel balked at the idea. They'd be hurt if we left them out. Rachel's reluctance was palpable, but she couldn't argue without raising suspicion. Mike watched as she forced a smile and nodded, adding her parents to the guest list. As the party approached, Mike noticed Rachel becoming increasingly anxious. She made several secretive phone calls, her voice hushed and urgent. Mike recorded each one, adding them to his growing collection of evidence. "Maybe we should scale back the party," Rachel suggested one evening, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her blouse. "It just seems like a lot of fuss." Mike reached out and took her hand, suppressing a shudder at the contact. "Nonsense," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You deserve to be celebrated properly." The week before the party, Mike executed the next phase of his plan. Using a secure, anonymous email account, he sent a carefully worded message to Rachel and Steve's HR department. The email hinted at an inappropriate workplace relationship, suggesting they check company communication logs and security camera footage. Mike knew the email would set off alarm bells. He imagined the HR team scrambling to investigate, the whispers that would start to circulate. It was the beginning of the end for Rachel and Steve's carefully constructed lie. 2 days before the party, Mike overheard Rachel arguing with Steve on the phone. He pressed his ear to the study door, his heart racing as he listened to their heated exchange. "We need to cool things off," Rachel was saying, her voice tight with worry. "People are starting to notice. The party this weekend, it's too risky." Steve's voice was muffled, but Mike could hear the resistance in his tone. "You're overreacting," Steve insisted. "No one suspects anything. We just need to act normal." As Rachel continued to argue, Mike silently retreated. A grim smile played on his lips. The cracks were beginning to show. The night before the party, Mike put the final touches on his presentation. The slideshow was a masterpiece of deception. Happy photos of their life together, carefully selected to showcase their seemingly perfect marriage. But hidden within the code was a devastating twist, ready to be unleashed at the touch of a button. As Rachel slept beside him, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break, Mike carefully placed copies of his evidence in envelopes. Each one was labeled with a name: Rachel's parents, Sarah, key friends and colleagues. Tomorrow, their world would shatter, and Mike would be the one holding the hammer. The private room at Le Chateau buzzed with excitement. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over the elegantly set tables, and the gentle clink of champagne glasses filled the air. To anyone looking in, it appeared to be nothing more than a joyous anniversary celebration. Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda, stood near the bar, their eyes fixed on their daughter. The concern Mike had planted weeks ago had clearly taken root, evident in the furrow of Tom's brow and the tight set of Linda's mouth. "She seems off, doesn't she?" Linda murmured to her husband, watching as Rachel laughed a little too loudly at something a co-worker said. Tom nodded, his frown deepening. Mike was right to be worried. Something's not right here. Across the room, Steve and Sarah arrived, their entrance causing a ripple of tension that only Mike seemed to notice. Steve's eyes darted around the room, pointedly avoiding Rachel. Sarah, oblivious to the undercurrents, beamed as she handed Mike a beautifully wrapped gift. 15 years, she said, her voice warm with genuine affection. "You and Rachel are such an inspiration." Mike accepted the gift with a gracious smile, tamping down the guilt that threatened to surface. Soon, very soon, Sarah's world would crumble. But Mike reminded himself that the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. As the evening progressed, Mike played the perfect host. He circulated among the guests, charming and attentive, all while acutely aware of the storm about to break. He noticed a few of Rachel's co-workers huddled in a corner, their whispers no doubt about the recent HR investigations. The trap was closing in. Midway through dinner, Mike stood, gently tapping his glass with a spoon. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Rachel looked up, a flicker of nervousness crossing her face before she masked it with a smile. "Friends, family," Mike began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate 15 years of marriage with Rachel and me." He clicked a button on the remote in his hand, and the large screen behind him came to life. A slideshow began, showing happy moments from their years together, their wedding day, vacations, the day Emma was born. When I met Rachel, Mike continued, his eyes scanning the room, I thought I was the luckiest man alive, and for many years, I was sure of it. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, her smile wobbling. If Mike hadn't known better, he might have been fooled by her performance. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? Mike's tone shifted, almost imperceptibly. Sometimes the surprises are wonderful, and sometimes... He clicked the remote again. The happy images on the screen suddenly gave way to something else entirely. Photos of Rachel and Steve together, screenshots of intimate text messages, video clips that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The room fell silent, the kind of heavy, shocked silence that feels like a physical weight. Mike's calm voice cut through the tension like a knife. Sometimes, the surprises shatter everything we thought we knew. What happened next was chaos in slow motion. Rachel, her face drained of all color, tried to stand, to reach Mike, but her legs gave out. Her father, fury etched into every line of his face, blocked her path. Steve made a dash for the door, but found his way barred by Sarah, her expression a mixture of devastation and rage. "How could you?" she screamed, her voice raw with pain. Mike continued his narration, his voice steady as he laid out the extent of Rachel and Steve's betrayal. He played audio recordings of their conversations, displayed screenshots of their secret communications. With each new piece of evidence, the gravity of the situation seemed to press down harder on everyone in the room. As the final slide appeared, divorce papers already signed by Mike, the room erupted. Rachel's sobs were nearly drowned out by the angry voices of their friends and family. Some of Rachel's co-workers were already on their phones, no doubt calling HR to report what they'd seen. Mike raised his hands, calling for silence. Remarkably, the room quieted, all eyes turning to him once more. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion for the first time that night. "I'm sorry to Sarah and to Tom and Linda. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I couldn't let this deception continue." He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I'll be taking a leave of absence from work to focus on my daughter, Emma. I ask for your privacy and understanding in the coming weeks." As Mike made his way to the exit, he paused to hand envelopes to Rachel's parents and Sarah. "Everything you need to know is in here," he said quietly. "I'm truly sorry." The last thing Mike saw as he walked out of the restaurant was Rachel crumpling to the floor, her carefully constructed world shattering around her. He felt a moment of pity, quickly overwhelmed by a sense of justice served. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Mike took a deep breath. The storm had broken. The truth was out. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it head on. The morning after the anniversary party, Mike Thompson sat at his kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold before him. The house was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if the very walls were holding their breath in anticipation of the storm to come. He didn't have to wait long. His phone buzzed incessantly, a barrage of messages and missed calls from Rachel. Mike ignored them all. He had said his piece last night. Now, it was time to weather the fallout. As the day wore on, reports began filtering in from friends and family. Rachel, it seemed, had launched a desperate smear campaign. She was telling anyone who would listen that Mike had been controlling and abusive throughout their marriage, that she had only sought comfort in Steve's arms because of Mike's cruelty. Mike listened to each account calmly, his face betraying no emotion. When the concerned callers finished, he would simply say, "I understand. I'll be sending you some information shortly." Then he would hang up and add another name to his list. By evening, Mike had emailed his meticulously gathered evidence to everyone in their inner circle. Text messages, photos, video clips, credit card statements, a mountain of irrefutable proof of Rachel's infidelity and lies. The next morning, Mike walked into the offices of Patricia Reeves. ESQ, the lawyer's reputation for ruthless efficiency, preceded her, and Mike had to dip into his overtime savings to afford her services. But as he laid out his case, showing Patricia the evidence he'd gathered, he knew it was worth every penny. "Mr. Thompson," Patricia said, leaning back in her chair with a predatory smile, "I think we have a very strong case here. Rachel won't know what hit her." Meanwhile, across town, Rachel sat in her own lawyer's office, her face pale and drawn. She had spent the morning trying to delete incriminating emails and texts, only to realize with growing horror that Mike must have copies of everything. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson," her lawyer said, his voice grave as he reviewed the evidence Mike had sent over. "But I'm afraid you have no leverage here. The infidelity is established beyond doubt, and Mr. Thompson has documented everything meticulously. We're going to have to advise you to settle." Rachel's world continued to crumble around her. Her parents, disgusted by her behavior and lies, refused to support her financially or emotionally. Her calls went straight to voicemail. Her letters returned unopened. The comfortable life she had taken for granted was slipping through her fingers like sand. At home, Mike faced a different battle. Emma, devastated by the revelations about her mother, had retreated into herself. She refused to speak to either parent, locking herself in her room for hours on end. Mike focused on being a stable presence, maintaining their routines as much as possible. He left meals outside Emma's door, kept her favorite snacks stocked in the pantry, and continued to drive her to and from school in silence. After a week of this, Mike made a decision. He reached out to Dr. Samantha Carter, a therapist specializing in adolescent trauma. "Emma's hurting," Mike explained during their initial consultation. "And as much as I know I can't fix this for her. She needs professional help." Dr. Carter nodded sympathetically. "You're doing the right thing, Mr. Thompson. Bringing Emma in for therapy is a crucial step in helping her process this trauma." Gradually, with Dr. Carter's help, Emma began to open up. She started joining Mike for meals again, and even initiated conversations about mundane topics like school and her friends. Mike cherished these moments, seeing them as small victories in the long battle ahead. Through it all, Mike continued to document every interaction meticulously. He kept a detailed log of all the time he spent with Emma, saved receipts for all expenses related to her care and activities, and recorded any attempts by Rachel to contact or manipulate their daughter. As the divorce proceedings began in earnest, Mike's evidence painted a clear and damning picture. Rachel's infidelity was established beyond any doubt, and Mike's role as the primary caregiver became evident through his extensive documentation. In the courtroom, Patricia Reeves argued convincingly for Mike to receive primary custody of Emma. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing with conviction, "Mr. Thompson has been the stable, consistent presence in Emma's life. While Mrs. Thompson was engaged in her affair, Mr. Thompson was attending parent-teacher conferences, helping with homework, and providing the emotional support Emma needed. It's clear that Emma's best interests lie in remaining primarily with her father." As Mike listened to Patricia lay out their case, he felt a mix of sadness and vindication. This wasn't the future he had envisioned when he married Rachel 15 years ago, but he was determined to make the best of it for Emma's sake and his own. The battle had begun in earnest, and Mike was prepared to fight with everything he had. As weeks passed, the full consequences of Rachel's actions became increasingly apparent. The comfortable life she had known, the respect she had enjoyed in their social circle, all of it crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. Rachel's parents, Tom and Linda, once doting and ever present in their lives, now refused to even speak to their daughter. Rachel's desperate calls went straight to voicemail. Her tear-stained letters returned unopened. The pain of their rejection was a constant, gnawing ache in Rachel's chest. One afternoon, Rachel stood at her parents' front door, hand poised to knock. She could hear movement inside, knew they were home, but as minutes ticked by and her knocks went unanswered, the harsh reality of her situation truly sank in. She had lost not just her husband and daughter, but her entire support system. Steve, the man for whom Rachel had risked everything, proved to be as unreliable as Mike had always suspected. Pressured by his own impending divorce and the scandal that now surrounded him, Steve cut all ties with Rachel. His last text message to her was brief and cruel. "This is too much. Don't contact me again." Rachel read and reread the message, tears blurring her vision. She had thrown away 15 years of marriage, had hurt her daughter deeply, all for a man who abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. The workplace investigation, triggered by Mike's anonymous tip, concluded with devastating results. Both Rachel and Steve were fired for violating company policies. The HR manager's words still rang in Rachel's ears. "Your behavior has brought disgrace to this company. We have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." In their small town, news traveled fast. The scandal of Rachel and Steve's affair, coupled with the dramatic revelation at the anniversary party, made finding new employment nearly impossible. Whispers followed Rachel wherever she went, sidelong glances, and abruptly ended conversations, making it clear that she was now a pariah in the community she had once called home. Rachel faced financial ruin, unable to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The house she had shared with Mike was now solely his, the joint bank accounts frozen. She found herself staying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the peeling wallpaper and musty smell a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. Meanwhile, Mike's unwavering focus on being the stable parent was paying off. Emma, still deeply hurt but slowly healing, had chosen to live primarily with her father. The court had acknowledged Mike's consistent presence in Emma's life, impressed by the meticulous records he had kept of his involvement in her day-to-day activities. During one of their therapy sessions, Emma had finally opened up about her feelings. "I'm still so angry at Mom," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Dad, he's been my rock through all of this. I don't know what I'd do without him." Dr. Carter nodded encouragingly. "It's okay to be angry, Emma. What your mother did has hurt you deeply. But it's good that you recognize your father's support. That stability is crucial for your healing process." The court's decision reflected this reality. Rachel's visitation rights were limited due to concerns about her stability. She was allowed supervised visits twice a month, a far cry from the daily presence she had once had in Emma's life. As the divorce neared finalization, Rachel made one last, desperate attempt to salvage what she had lost. Late one night, she appeared at Mike's door, her eyes red-rimmed and pleading. "Mike, please," she begged, her voice cracking with emotion. "I know I made a terrible mistake, but we can work through this, can't we? For Emma's sake, for the sake of our family." Mike listened calmly, his face impassive. The sight of Rachel, once so put together and confident, now broken and pleading, stirred a complex mix of emotions in him. But the trust that had been shattered could not be so easily repaired. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "But what's done is done. There's no going back. Instead of trying to fix what can't be fixed, I think you should focus on rebuilding your relationship with Emma. She needs her mother, even if things can't be the way they were before." As Rachel's shoulders slumped in defeat, Mike felt a weight lift from his own. He had faced a storm head-on and had come out stronger on the other side. In the quiet moments between the legal battles and emotional upheavals, Mike focused on helping Emma navigate the complex emotions of their new reality. They had honest conversations about trust, forgiveness, and consequences. "Emma," Mike said one evening as they sat on the porch swing, "I want you to know that it's okay to still love your mom. What she did was wrong, and it's okay to be angry about that. But she's still your mother, and it's okay to have a relationship with her if that's what you want." Emma leaned against her father's shoulder, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "I don't know if I can forgive her," she admitted softly. Mike wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Forgiveness is a journey, sweetheart. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about finding peace for yourself." These conversations, difficult as they were, helped Emma begin to process her feelings. She started to see Mike not just as her father, but as someone of integrity and strength, a model for how to face adversity with grace and resilience. As the dust began to settle, Mike and Emma found themselves forging a new path forward, their bond stronger than ever in the face of the storm they had weathered together. The day the divorce was finalized felt almost anticlimactic after the months of turmoil. Mike sat in the courtroom, his face a mask of calm as the judge read out the terms. Beside him, Patricia Reeves allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. In the matter of Thompson versus Thompson, the judge intoned, the court rules as follows. Primary custody of the minor child, Emma Thompson, is awarded to the father, Michael Thompson. Rachel Thompson is granted supervised visitation twice monthly. Mike's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and sadness. This was the outcome he had fought for, but he took no joy in Emma losing full access to her mother. The judge continued, furthermore, Rachel Thompson is ordered to pay child support in the amount of $800 per month. Mike heard Rachel's sharp intake of breath from across the courtroom. He knew this would be a significant financial strain given her current unemployment, but he also knew that Emma deserved that support. Finally, the family home is awarded to Michael Thompson to provide stability for the minor child. As the gavel fell, marking the official end of their marriage, Mike felt a chapter of his life closing. He turned to shake Patricia's hand, murmuring his thanks for her expert handling of the case. Outside the courthouse, Mike paused on the steps, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. He had emerged victorious, but the victory felt hollow. The true challenge lay ahead, building a new life for himself and Emma from the ashes of the old. In the weeks that followed, Mike threw himself into securing their future. He used his share of the divorce settlement wisely, first paying off the remaining mortgage on the house. As he signed the final payment, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This house that had seen so much pain would now be a safe haven for him and Emma, free and clear. Next, he set up a college fund for Emma. Your future is important, he told her as he showed her the account statement. I want you to have every opportunity, no matter what. Emma's eyes had filled with tears, and she had hugged him tightly. These moments of connection, born from the shared pain they had endured, were precious to Mike. The rest of the settlement went into home improvements. Mike and Emma spent weekends painting walls, replacing old carpets with hardwood floors, and planting a small vegetable garden in the backyard. Each change, no matter how small, felt like a fresh start. At work, Mike's professionalism during the ordeal had not gone unnoticed. His supervisor called him into the office one afternoon, a rare occurrence that initially filled Mike with apprehension. Thompson, the supervisor said, leaning back in his chair, I've been impressed with how you've handled yourself these past months. Despite everything going on in your personal life, your work hasn't suffered. In fact, you've been one of our most reliable employees. Mike nodded, unsure where this was going. We've had a supervisory position open up, the supervisor continued. I'd like you to consider taking it. It comes with a pay raise, of course, and more flexible hours. Could be good for you and Emma. The promotion was unexpected but welcome. The flexible hours allowed Mike to be there for Emma in ways he couldn't before, attending her soccer games and school events without having to juggle his work schedule. More than that, Mike found satisfaction in mentoring younger postal workers. He saw a bit of his younger self in them and took pride in helping them navigate the ins and outs of the job. 2 years after the divorce, Mike heard through mutual friends about Rachel. She had moved to another state, starting over in a new city where her past was unknown. She had found entry-level work, slowly rebuilding her career from the ground up. Most surprisingly, Rachel was in therapy, working through the personal issues that had led to her infidelity. Mike felt a complex mix of emotions at this news, a lingering anger, yes, but also a glimmer of hope that Rachel was finally confronting her demons. Emma, now in college, had a complicated but improving relationship with her mother. They had bi-weekly phone calls, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. During school breaks, Emma would sometimes visit Rachel, their relationship evolving into a more adult dynamic. Despite his personal feelings about Rachel, Mike supported these interactions. He recognized Emma's need for both parents in her life, even if the family unit they had once known was gone forever. "How was your visit with your mom?" Mike would ask when Emma returned from these trips, keeping his tone neutral and supportive. Emma would usually shrug, a small smile playing on her lips. "It was okay. Better than last time. We're working on it." As time passed, Mike found himself reflecting on the journey they had been through. One crisp autumn morning, as he and Emma prepared for a fishing trip, he realized something profound. He was happy, not the naive, unquestioning happiness of his early marriage, but a deeper, hard-won contentment. He had emerged from the crucible of betrayal and divorce stronger, more confident in himself and his abilities. He had dated casually over the past couple of years, but found that his primary focus remained on his relationship with Emma and his own personal growth. As they drove to the lake, the same lake Mike had been headed to when he discovered Rachel's affair, he glanced at Emma in the passenger seat. She was no longer the hurt, confused teenager she had been during the divorce. She had grown into a strong, compassionate young woman, resilient in the face of adversity. They arrived at the lake just as the sun was peeking over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the calm water. Mike showed Emma how to bait her hook, his hand steady as he guided hers. "You know," he said as they cast their lines into the water, "I used to come here with my dad when I was about your age. He taught me everything I know about fishing." Emma smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that warmed Mike's heart. "And now you're teaching me. It's like a family tradition." Mike nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Yeah, it is. A new tradition for our new life." As they sat in comfortable silence, waiting for the fish to bite, Mike looked at his daughter. He saw the strong, compassionate young woman she was becoming, and felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. The path had been difficult, fraught with pain and betrayal. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming their faces and sparkling off the lake's surface, Mike knew that they had weathered the storm. They had emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and with a deep appreciation for the bond between them. In that moment, with his daughter by his side and the peaceful lake stretching out before them, Mike Thompson felt truly at peace. The silent storm had passed, and in its wake, a new day had dawned. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Growing up in a small rural town, I was always the quiet, observant one. The vast open fields and the endless horizon offered plenty of time to think, dream, and develop a sharp eye. As a teenager, I spent countless hours with my father's old hunting rifle, aiming at tin cans and small game. It wasn't just a pastime. It became an obsession to perfect each shot, to understand the subtleties of wind, distance, and timing. When I joined the military, those skills found purpose. As a sniper, I honed my abilities to near perfection. The hours of lying in wait, patient and invisible, taught me not just the art of the shot, but the discipline of focus. But life outside the military wasn't kind. The transition from soldier to civilian was a harsh one, especially with the burden of a dishonorable discharge hanging over my head. A single lapse in judgment, a punch thrown in anger at the wrong superior, cost me everything I had built. Lost and aimless, I drifted until an unconventional opportunity presented itself. An outlet for my skills and a way to carve out a new life, even if it meant walking the shadows. These moments bring me back to the desert. It's fitting, I suppose, as my crosshairs currently rest on a figure framed perfectly in the distance. I am not a terrorist nor a common criminal, yet here, in this moment, I am the villain. My target is a middle-aged banker, perspiring heavily despite the air conditioning. Oblivious to the world outside his hotel room, he lies entangled with a younger colleague. My mission? To ensure his story ends tonight. The contract came through encrypted channels, the payment settled in cryptocurrency. I don't know who hired me, nor do I care. By the time the authorities piece together what happened, I'll be nothing but a ghost, leaving behind no traceable steps. I keep watching through the scope. I'm not a voyeur, but I need the right moment to fire. For various reasons, I can't take the shot while they're still in the act. Usually, when the guy finishes, he either rolls over or gets up, and that's my cue. I adjust the scope slightly, scanning the visible part of the room through the window. Aside from the couple, there's no one there. I glance at her. She's a beauty. The contract specifies she's not to be injured, not physically, at least. I can't predict how witnessing her lover's head explode as he heads to the bathroom might scar her mentally. I look away briefly to stay alert. Getting too focused on the target could put me in danger. I'm here alone, without backup or cover, so I have to ensure my position is secure. It is. I'm on a rooftop across the street from the hotel where the banker is staying. I return to the scope. They're close to finishing. I shift my position and confirm nothing in the environment has changed. Then it happens. He arches his back, cries out in climax, trembles a few times, and then goes still. As expected, he gets off her and heads to the bathroom. I complete the task with precision, disappearing into the night before anyone notices. By the time law enforcement arrives, I'm miles away. I stash my gear in one of several storage units I maintain under different names, all prepaid in cash. On the drive home, I reflect once again on how I ended up in this line of work. How did I become a hitman specializing almost exclusively in cheating spouses? The shooting part is simple. I've always been good with a rifle. Growing up on a farm, I hunted regularly and developed a knack for precision, especially with rifles. I could make shots no one else could, almost instinctively. When I enlisted in the Marines and went to sniper school, I learned the technical aspects: trajectory, wind resistance, ballistics. But I rarely needed those skills. I could make shots by instinct that even seasoned snipers struggled to replicate with their calculations. I likely would have had a stellar career in the Marine Corps, but then something happened that changed everything and set me on this path: a cheating spouse. Gabrielle was a petite, dark-haired French girl I met in a bar while on leave. She was lively, attractive, and alluring in ways that stirred all kinds of thoughts. She spent the evening with my best friend Bobby and me, dancing with each of us in turn. By the end of the night, it was clear there was a spark between her and Bobby. With a forced smile, I did the only thing a good friend could. "Good luck, Bobby," I said with a grin that didn't reach my eyes, then headed back to base alone. After that, whenever they went out, they were inseparable. I often found myself the third wheel, or she'd bring along a friend to keep me company. After 3 months, Bobby showed me the engagement ring he'd bought her. "Wow, Bobby," I said, inspecting the sizable diamond. "That's a rock. Are you sure you're ready for this?" "When you know, you know," he laughed, striking a mock-wise pose. "I'm not letting her get away." The look Gabrielle gave when Bobby proposed that night stuck with me. I expected excitement, maybe joy, but for a moment, there was a flash of calculation in her eyes before she put on the appropriate reaction. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin his moment, but I couldn't shake my unease. As best man, I organized the bachelor party, and let me tell you, it was legendary. Half the platoon was there, and the night was a blur of drinks, laughter, and chaos. We had to carry Bobby back to his bunk, and he remembered almost nothing the next day. Naturally, there were dancers. What's a bachelor party without them? But I ensured Bobby stayed out of trouble. Before planning the party, I had even spoken to Gabrielle about boundaries. If she'd said no dancers, I told the guys, then there wouldn't have been any. I didn't want Bobby divorced before he was married. The wedding was small, attended by her parents, a few friends, and some guys from our platoon. As I mentioned before, I was the best man. 2 months later, we were deployed to the desert for a 3-month tour. I'll never forget that patrol. Our mission was to search a village believed to harbor rebels. My spotter and I had scouted a vantage point where I could provide overwatch for the team. It wasn't perfect. There were areas I couldn't see, but it was the best option available. Bobby had been acting strange all day, unusually anxious and short-tempered, even with me, which was out of character. "What's wrong with you?" I asked, concerned about his erratic behavior. "Nothing," he replied with a forced grin. "Just itching to get going." That was the last conversation I ever had with Bobby. He didn't come back from that patrol. I didn't see what happened since his position was out of my sightline, but his team reported that when they encountered the enemy, Bobby stood up, shouted something like, "Go, you fools!" and charged, firing his M16 from the hip like he was in a movie. He didn't make it 3 meters before they cut him down. As his best friend, it fell to me to gather his belongings for shipment back to the U.S. That's when I found the letter. "Dear Bobby, I know this is the coward's way, but I have to tell you that I've been seeing someone else, and we've fallen in love. I'm leaving you so we can be together. I want you to know I truly loved you. but the time apart made me realize I'm not in love with you. You deserve better. It's best if we end things so you can find someone who loves you the way you deserve. Please don't hate me. John says you have a month left on tour, so by the time you return, I'll be moving out. I won't ask for anything in the divorce and hope we can remain friends if you can forgive me. Best wishes, Gabrielle. Damn witch, I yelled after reading it. Everything about Bobby's behavior suddenly made sense, and I knew there had to be consequences. My tour was cut short so I could escort Bobby's body back to the U.S. When we unloaded the coffin, Gabrielle approached it, tears streaming down her face. She placed her hand on the casket, but I stopped her. Don't you dare, I said, my voice cold. What do you mean? She asked, shocked. You betrayed him, I hissed, stepping between her and the coffin. She recoiled, stunned, and that's when I noticed the officer with her. It was Colonel John Edwards. My stomach churned as I saw him drape an arm over her shoulders in a gesture of comfort. What the hell? I snapped, unable to hold back my rage. Are you the one she left him for? Stand down, Marine, the colonel ordered, his tone commanding. How dare you? I shot back. You sent a Dear John letter to an active duty soldier right before a mission. What did you think would happen? That's enough, he barked. I couldn't contain myself. My first punch landed squarely on his throat, dropping him to his knees. A kick to the groin sent him to the ground, and I followed with 4 strikes to his face before security restrained me. My satisfaction came later when we were both court-martialed, him for misconduct, me for attacking a superior officer. He was discharged without pension, and I spent a year in military prison, leaving with a dishonorable discharge. After my release, I couldn't move on. It took me a year to track down Gabrielle, who had relocated to Canada and was living with a French-Canadian businessman. I didn't know what happened to Colonel Edwards. He'd disappeared from the picture. I considered simply shooting her from a distance. It would have been easy. No security, no cameras. But she wouldn't understand why, and I wanted it to be personal. I wanted her to know who and why. She made it easy. One night she was at a dance with friends. True to form, she was cheating. The guy kissing her wasn't her businessman. I watched from the bar as he whispered in her ear, and they moved toward the exit. I followed, circling the building, and saw them heading to an SUV in the parking lot. I waited by my car to see if they'd drive off, but when he opened the back door, I knew it was happening right there. Quietly, I approached. As I got closer, I saw Gabrielle bent over the back seat with the guy behind her. I didn't want to eliminate him. I had no issue with him. I quickly strangled him until he collapsed unconscious on the ground. It took her a few seconds to realize the movement had stopped. When she turned, she saw me standing there, pointing my Glock 9 at her. Her eyes widened in recognition, and she opened her mouth to speak. I cut her off. Bobby says hi, witch. I acted swiftly, ensuring the mission's completion before stepping away unnoticed. Before the sound of shot fire reached the bar, I was already gone, crossing back into the United States in under 4 hours. Avenging Bobby gave me an idea. Surely, many people were dealing with infidelity at this very moment. Some might seek reconciliation, others would opt for divorce. But there would always be those seeking a more permanent solution, and I had the skills to provide it. That's how I became a hitman specializing in cheating spouses. Overall, it's an easy job. These are ordinary people, unaware they've been marked and without any personal security. After about 4 years in the business, earning significant money, I met Juliana. She was the finance manager at a car dealership where I went to buy a new car. Bright, sharp, and a captivating conversationalist, she was stunning. Just under 5 feet tall in heels, with legs that seemed endless, jet black hair, and a figure that could stop traffic. From the start, there was chemistry. While discussing financing, I decided to test the waters. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? I asked. She smiled, her eyes lighting up. I'd love that. In less than 30 minutes, we had a date planned. A year and a half later, after a whirlwind courtship, Juliana and I were married in a lavish ceremony with over 200 guests, including her family and friends, my parents, and a handful of military buddies. To the world and to Juliana, I was a successful financial manager, working from home. I explained my frequent trips as client meetings, which made for a perfect cover. Life with Juliana was great. She supported my finance work even when I traveled. She always welcomed me home passionately, and our closeness was frequent and enthusiastic, sometimes daily. Juliana rarely went out alone and always maintained proper boundaries when interacting with others, even at dances. I had no doubt she loved me, just as I loved her. My contracts came through the dark web. I never met clients in person, only communicated online, and required undeniable proof of infidelity. Clients never knew when or where the target would be eliminated. Payments were made to a virtual account, released only upon completion of the contract. If I couldn't fulfill a job, I refunded the money, though that hadn't happened yet. With no personal connections to the sufferers and payment in untraceable cryptocurrency, law enforcement never came close to me. Most of my targets were men, about 10-1. When men cheated, women often wanted them dead. When women cheated, their partners usually wanted the other man eliminated. Of course, there were exceptions, but I had no moral qualms about the work. Clients paid well, and I believed cheaters got what they deserved. Life continued smoothly. After 3 years of marriage, Juliana and I had our first child, followed by another just 18 months later. We provided a stable home, and our kids grew up well, eventually attending college fully paid for. As the kids left home, Juliana, feeling the emptiness, returned to work at the dealership. Meanwhile, I worked mostly from home with occasional business trips. I decided it was time to retire. 1 or 2 more contracts would fully fund my pension. I was tired of the life. Scanning the job board I used for contracts, I saw 2 available jobs, one nearby and another across the country. I chose the local contract, thinking it would be my penultimate job. The target was a man named Peter Miller. The attached dossier was detailed. Peter was a group insurance salesman covering 3 states, including mine, and traveled frequently. He was married to Janine, with 3 young children, Paul, Mary, and Siobhan. Reports from private investigators included evidence of him having affairs with 4 different women. He was currently staying at a hotel less than 50 miles away for a week. The dossier listed the hotel and even his room number. It noted he often traveled with a woman who wasn't his wife, though it was unclear if he had company this time. The photos in the dossier were typical. Pictures of Peter, his wife, and his kids. I always found it odd that photos of the children were included, but they always were. The research was thorough. I Googled the hotel, confirming Peter's room was on the 5th floor east side. A quick check of Google Earth showed an unfinished building down the block. From its upper floors, I'd have a clear line of sight into Peter's room, as the surrounding buildings were only 3 stories high. That evening, I informed Juliana of my upcoming business trip. "I have to leave for a trip next week," I said. "I'll head out Monday morning and be back by Thursday, maybe Friday." Juliana glanced up from her book. "I thought you were done with those trips," she remarked, her tone curious rather than accusatory. "This might be the last one," I replied. "But if this doesn't pan out, there could be one more." She nodded, then smiled. "That means we'll have the whole weekend together." We didn't spend the entire weekend in bed, but it was a close call. After a fantastic Friday night, we spent Saturday running errands before enjoying dinner at our favorite restaurant. The rest of Saturday night and most of Sunday were dedicated to each other in bed. On Monday morning, I left the house, drove to the airport, and parked my car. From there, I walked about a mile to a nearby warehouse where I kept an inconspicuous car for jobs like this, a gray Toyota sedan that was utterly forgettable. Registered under a fake ID strong enough to pass police scrutiny, it was perfect for my purposes. I positioned myself on the 7th floor of an abandoned construction site, my rifle trained on the target's hotel room window. Just after noon, the man entered the room. He fiddled with his belongings for a while, made a brief phone call, and then left. I didn't follow him. I knew he'd return, so I settled in to wait. With the site abandoned, I wasn't worried about being discovered. He returned after 6 p.m., visibly hurried. He went straight to the bathroom to shower, then walked back to the bedroom. Nothing unusual, but his physique didn't explain his appeal to women. Thin and uninspiring, it was clear his charm must lie in his words rather than his body. After about 30 minutes, he dressed and left again. I ate some food and waited, confident he'd return with a companion. I planned to snap photographic proof of his infidelity before putting a bullet in his skull. The contract was silent on the woman's fate, so I'd spare her. I didn't know if she was a cheater or just a lonely woman drawn to this man. Without that knowledge, I had no reason to liquidate her. It was past midnight when the lights in the room flicked on again. Looking through my scope, I saw the target enter with a tall, dark-haired woman. She pinned him against the door and dropped to her knees almost immediately. From my angle, a couple of floors above, I could only see his torso down as her back was to me. I wasn't concerned. They'd eventually move further into the room. Still entangled, they undressed as they moved toward the bed. By the time they reached it, she was down to her underwear, and he was completely without clothes. He pushed her onto the bed, kissing her as she reclined. From my vantage point, I could see only the tops of their bodies. Then she tilted her head back, and I adjusted my aim to focus on her face. In that moment, I had to summon all my self-control to stop myself from pulling the trigger. Instead, I activated the camera linked to my scope and captured a digital photo. For the next 3 hours, I recorded photos and videos as the couple had sex. They didn't bother closing the blinds or turning off the lights, making themselves visible to anyone on the street. Finally, exhausted, they had one last session before falling asleep. When the lights went out, I leaned back, my heart racing and my mind in chaos. I opened the first photo I'd taken through the scope. The woman was arching her back, her eyes wide with pleasure. I zoomed in, studying her face and those familiar eyes. My blood ran cold. The eyes staring back at me belonged to Juliana, my wife. Thoughts flooded my mind. I couldn't proceed with the hit. One of the key elements of my work was avoiding any connection to the sufferers or their partners. If I eliminated them now, I'd be the first person the police questioned. My alibi wouldn't hold under scrutiny. Beyond that, I wasn't ready to decide what to do about Juliana. The anger surging through me made it tempting to shoot her on impulse. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to think about her, about our children, and about the consequences of my actions. Whatever choice I made, I'd have to live with it for the rest of my life. The thought crossed my mind. If I abandoned the contract, someone else might take it and be less discerning about sparing the idiot's partner. I also had to consider whether this was a setup. Could someone have orchestrated this situation for me to catch Juliana cheating, just to mess with me? I doubted it was law enforcement. They wouldn't risk putting someone in my sights, knowing I could act immediately. But it could be someone connected to a past contract, seeking revenge. No, I had to finish the job, but it had to look random or natural to avoid any follow-up from the authorities. Juliana could wait. I packed up my gear and stored it in my designated storage unit. I wouldn't be using it for this job. While there, I grabbed some extra electronic equipment. Back at the hotel, I found their cars and discreetly placed GPS trackers on both. The next morning, after they left, Juliana returned to my house, and he went about his usual activities. I used the opportunity to enter his hotel room with an electronic key card. A thorough search revealed nothing surprising, just some blood pressure meds and Viagra in his luggage. I installed several hidden cameras around the room. I had 4 days to finish the contract, and since I'd told Juliana I wouldn't be back until Thursday or Friday, there was no need for frequent communication. I booked a room at the hotel using one of my fake IDs. Staying legally would simplify things. I also noticed the hotel's surveillance cameras were only at the entrance and in the elevators, none in the stairwells or hallways near the rooms. Throughout the day, I tracked their movements while making preparations. Juliana went to work, hit the gym, and then returned home. Later, the man's tracker indicated he was heading toward my house. I silently fumed, vowing that if she let him inside, I'd eliminated them both without caring about the consequences. Thankfully, he stopped about 5 blocks away. Just after 6 in the evening, Juliana called. "Hey, baby," she said. "Hi, honey, I missed you last night. I thought you'd call," I replied. "Sorry. I fell asleep in front of the TV, and when I woke up, it was late," she said smoothly, without hesitation. "I thought so. That's why I didn't bother you," I said, clenching my fist. This was the first time I knew Juliana had lied to me. There had likely been others, but I hadn't caught them until now. "How's the meeting going?" she asked sweetly. An unexpected complication came up. Someone showed up at the meeting who raised some questions. I think I can close the deal, but it might take a little longer than expected. "Once it's done, though, no more business trips," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. "So, you'll be back Friday instead of Thursday?" she asked, her tone sounding almost pleased. "You don't sound too disappointed," I said, my words dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, no, not at all," she replied warmly. "I'm just happy this is your last trip. If it takes 1 extra day, it's worth it." "What are your plans tonight?" I asked, keeping her talking. "I just got back from the gym, so I'm going to relax in front of the TV," she said casually. "Then I'll go to bed early." "Well, remember what my mom always said? If you're not in bed by 11, you have to go home," I joked. She laughed softly. "I'll call you tomorrow night. I miss you." "Good night." I ended the call without saying more. She didn't seem to notice. My next call was to a chemist friend who sometimes supplied me when I needed unconventional methods. I told him I needed something that would mimic a heart attack. By the time I returned to the hotel after picking it up, the target was back in his room. I accessed the camera feed and saw him on the phone. "Hi, Jules," he said cheerfully, making me wince. Juliana hated when people shortened her name, yet she let this guy call her Jules. It was a small thing, but it stung. "No, I just got back. Give me an hour and I'll meet you downstairs. Say 7:30? I'll make you forget all about that poor a-hole you married," he added with a smug grin. After listening to her response, he softened. No, Juliana, I didn't mean to upset you. Baby, please." He stared at his phone in frustration. "Crap," he muttered. I smiled grimly. It seemed his night of fun had hit a snag. Moments later, my phone rang. It was Juliana. "Hi, baby," she said. "How are you?" "I'm fine. What's up?" I asked, masking my irritation. "Nothing," she replied quickly. "I just realized I didn't say I love you earlier, and I wanted to make sure you knew." Her voice sounded slightly off, almost upset. "Are you okay?" I asked cautiously. "You sound different." "I'm fine," she insisted too quickly. "I just miss you, that's all." Her phone beeped, signaling another call. Glancing at the camera feed, I saw Peter on his phone again. It was clear he was calling her. "Why don't we talk for a bit?" I suggested. "It'll almost feel like I'm there." I waited to see what choice she would make. Keep talking to me, or return to her lover for more sweet talk and another night together. She chose poorly. "No, I'm just being silly," she said quickly. "Listen, my mom's trying to call. I just wanted to tell you I love you. Good night." Before I could stop myself, the words escaped. "Good night, Jules," I said coldly. I hung up, wondering if she had caught the icy tone in my voice. Back in Peter's room, his phone rang again. His grin returned as he answered. "Hi, baby. Yes, I'm so sorry. I know you hate it when I say bad things about him. It's just my insecurity. I just want to be the best lover for you and make you feel as good as you make me feel." He paused, nodding. "Okay. Tomorrow, then. How about dinner at Archie's? Shall I book a table for 7? "Yes. I love you too, Juliana. Good night." Hearing him tell her I love you sent another wave of fury through me. Was she in love with this man, or was she just parroting the words? I'd find out soon enough. Shortly after he called room service to order food and beers, it was time for me to act. I waited for the food to arrive and for the staff to leave. Once Peter had started eating, I knocked on his door, standing to the side so he couldn't see me through the peephole, not that I thought he'd check. When he opened the door, his face twisted in shock as he stared down the barrel of my silenced Glock. "Good evening, Peter," I said pleasantly. "Mind if I come in?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped forward, forcing him to retreat as the door closed behind me. "What do you want?" he stammered. "I have about $500 in my wallet. You can take it." I chuckled softly. "So rude," I said, shaking my head. "I just want to have a nice chat." "What? Chat about what?" he asked, his confusion obvious. "Well, you see, my employer, someone you're quite familiar with, wants some answers," I said. "Your wife, Janine, has a few questions. I already have plenty of information, but there are gaps to fill. If you lie to me, I'll find out, and I'll shoot you." Peter turned pale. I don't—" "Relax," I interrupted. "I don't want to shoot you. That sounds like too much effort, and your wife would prefer to ruin you financially rather than have you dead. She thinks your kids might miss you if you were gone. But she wants the truth. And make no mistake, she'll find every woman you've been with and let their husbands know. If you tell me everything now, I'll leave this room without turning it into a crime scene." "Sound fair?" I grabbed one of the beers he'd ordered, opened it, and took a sip. "Is this the best they've got here?" I said, wrinkling my nose. Peter's eyes darted toward the door, but hopelessness settled on his face. "If I tell you everything, you won't shoot me?" he asked cautiously. "I won't shoot you," I confirmed. "I'll leave, and you can move on with your life. But I suggest you call your wife after I'm gone. Maybe if you grovel, she'll forgive you for the kids' sake." Defeated, Peter slumped into a chair. "What do you want to know?" "There are 4 women I already know about," I said, listing their names and where they lived. His stunned expression confirmed my information was accurate. "But I need more details about one. Juliana. She works at a car dealership. Tell me everything. How you met, how long it's been, the whole story." Peter hesitated, but the realization that he had no choice set in. He began haltingly. "I met Juliana 4 months ago. I went to her dealership to sell insurance, and we hit it off. She's gorgeous, charming, and has an amazing body. I couldn't resist. I asked her to lunch, and she said yes. He swallowed nervously and continued. After lunch, she surprised me by suggesting dinner that same night. She told me her husband was out of town. That evening, we ended up at my hotel. She gave me a night I'll never forget. I grimaced but motioned for him to go on. How often did you see her? I asked. 8 or 9 times, he admitted. Whenever her husband was away, she'd call. If I could make it, I'd come here. I even canceled dates with my other girlfriends for her. She's better than any of them. He grinned briefly, lost in the memory, but sobered when he saw my expression. Nervously, he finished his beer and glanced at the minibar. Can I have another? He asked hesitantly. I nodded. Help yourself, I said. But let's keep this civil. It'd be unfortunate if I had to shoot you over a misunderstanding. Peter chuckled nervously, grabbed another beer, and sat back down. I pressed further. So, Juliana was calling the shots? Do you think she's done this before? He shrugged. Probably. She's too skilled to be new at it. But she never let me insult her husband. She wouldn't even tell me his name. Once, I called him an a-hole and she ripped into me. That's why she didn't meet me tonight. She's still mad. I frowned. Interesting that she's so protective of him while doing what she's doing. Peter laughed. She's got this strange split personality. One part is the devoted wife who won't tolerate anyone disrespecting her husband. The other part is the woman who comes to me for fun. It's like she doesn't see any contradiction. I leaned back, processing his words. I'm not sure her husband would share that perspective, I said quietly. Suddenly, Peter winced and clutched his chest. You okay? I asked. Just indigestion, he muttered. Probably the beer. He rubbed his left arm absent-mindedly, then began choking. His face turned purple and sweat poured down his forehead as he clutched his chest with both hands. Help me, he gasped, panic in his eyes. I locked eyes with him. Peter, I said calmly, look at me. He raised his head weakly, barely able to breathe. You should have stayed away from Juliana, I said coldly. She's my wife. His eyes widened in shock just before rolling back into his head. He slumped over, motionless. I knew he was gone, though it would take another 10 to 15 minutes for his body to completely shut down. I used that time to carefully remove any evidence of my presence. I turned on the TV at a low volume and arranged the food in front of it. When his body was found, it would look like he died of a heart attack while eating dinner and watching TV. Given his blood pressure medication and Viagra, I was confident an autopsy would attribute his end of life to natural causes. I checked his body one last time to confirm he was dead, then ensured the hallway was clear. Hanging a "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door, I returned to my room. The next day, Juliana called around 5:30 p.m. Hey baby, how was your day? She asked cheerfully. Great, I replied. I resolved one issue and am confident I can settle the last one soon. I had an idea, since this is my last business trip. How about we fly to Mexico for the weekend? I can pick you up at the airport and we can celebrate, maybe even extend it into a vacation. You probably need a break, and it's not like you really need that job. Juliana laughed. That sounds amazing. I'll talk to Barry tomorrow and see what he says. I'll call you tomorrow night so we can book tickets. Perfect, I said. What's your plan for tonight? Same as always, she replied. I have some work to finish, and then I'll watch a show. I glanced at the clock, knowing she thought she had a dinner reservation at 7, and it would take at least 40 minutes for her to get there. Dinner's ready, she said casually. I'll talk to you tomorrow, okay? Okay. Enjoy your dinner and cheat, I said. Bye, baby. Love you, she said. I hung up without responding. At 8:30, there was a knock on Peter's door. Since I'd placed the Do Not Disturb sign, housekeeping hadn't entered the room. I figured Juliana had gone to the restaurant, waited, and then come to find out why Peter was late. After 20 minutes, the knock came again. The door squeaked as a hotel employee entered, followed by Juliana. They found Peter slumped over his dinner, unmoving. The employee rushed to him while Juliana stood in the doorway watching. Is he dead? She asked flatly. The employee checked his pulse but didn't need to. Peter was clearly gone. Yes, he's dead. Without a word, Juliana turned and left. By the time the hotel worker realized she was gone, she was already in the elevator, leaving the hotel. The police and paramedics arrived shortly after. Upon searching the room, they found his medications and concluded he'd suffered a fatal heart attack. His medical history and the circumstances of his end of life supported the conclusion. When questioned, the hotel worker explained that a woman had asked him to check on the man. He admitted seeing her visit earlier in the week, though he didn't know her identity. The worker mentioned that Peter often entertained female guests, who he suspected were escorts, but never reported because Peter tipped generously. Once the investigation wrapped up, I retrieved my surveillance equipment, packed it away, and checked out of the hotel. Early the next morning, I returned to the parking lot and removed the GPS tracker from Peter's car before leaving. On Saturday morning, I picked up Juliana from the airport, and we headed to the villa I had rented. She squealed with delight as she looked around, especially when she saw the private pool with sun loungers. "I'm going to change," she said excitedly. "Can we talk for a minute first, Jules?" I asked. She stopped and turned toward me. "You know I don't like it when you call me that," she said. "Why not?" I asked. "You didn't seem to mind when Peter called you that." Her face turned pale, but she tried to play it off. "Who's Peter? Do you know him?" "Peter, the insurance agent, the one you've been sleeping with for the past 4 months. The one you were with Monday night, when you told me you were too tired and fell asleep without calling," I said. "I don't know what you're talking about, or what you think you've heard," she started. I placed a photo on the table between us, the one I had taken through the scope of her lying on her back, eyes wide. She sank into a chair. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, is that all you have to say?" I asked, incredulous. She shrugged. "What do you want me to say?" "How long?" I asked. She looked me in the eye. "About 4 months. And I assume he wasn't the first," I said coldly. "Do we really have to do this?" she asked. "Do what? Confront the truth about my cheating wife?" I shot back. "Insults, really? Can't you come up with something more original? Before you start, though, there's something you need to understand," she said. "Like what? Why you did this?" I asked. I was about to suggest she couldn't control herself, but I stopped and let her speak. She began hesitantly. "We've been married a long time, haven't we?" I nodded silently, waiting for her to continue. "How many times a week do you think we have sex on average?" she asked, her voice measured but pointed. I paused to consider her question. "Well, it's slowed down a bit with age," I admitted, but before I could elaborate, she interrupted. "Exactly," she said firmly. "At first, we were like teenagers, every day, sometimes multiple times. When that phase passed, we still had sex at least every other day, sometimes more. And the sex was incredible. You are the best lover I've ever had. But then you started going on business trips, sometimes for weeks at a time. I was used to having sex almost daily, and suddenly, you expected me to go without it for long stretches." She exhaled deeply, steadying herself. "One night, when you were away, I decided to relieve some tension by going to the gym. But instead, I ended up going home with someone. It wasn't planned, but it satisfied the need you had awakened in me. The next day, I felt awful, terrified you'd find out, that you'd be hurt, that you might leave me. When you came back, I practically attacked you in bed every day for a week, trying to erase my guilt and make it up to you for something you didn't even know had happened. But deep down, I knew it would happen again the next time you left. And it did." She looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. "Over time, I had to accept it as the new normal. But I created some rules for myself." Her voice softened as she explained. "First, I never did it when you were home. Not because I thought you'd catch me, but because I didn't need anyone else when you were here. You've always been my first and best lover. Second, I never brought anyone into our house. I wouldn't disrespect you like that. And I never allowed anyone to speak badly about you. If a man even hinted at disrespecting you, I ended things immediately. Third, I got tested regularly for STDs, not because I was afraid of getting caught, but because I refused to put you at risk. I also made sure I couldn't get pregnant. I used an IUD and birth control implants. When we decided to have children, I stopped all of that. If you want proof, I have DNA tests for the kids." She leaned closer, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. "Yes, I've done this the entire time we've been together. You turn me on so much that I can't go without. A day or two is fine, but beyond that, I needed an outlet. That's all that ever was. Physical. I've never had feelings for any of them. The only man I've ever loved is you. When you told me this was your last business trip, I was overjoyed. I thought I wouldn't need second-rate substitutes anymore because I'd finally have the best at home." Her voice cracked, and she looked away for a moment before finishing. "The irony is, what might have been my last time with someone else turned out to be the time I got caught." "Your last time?" I asked skeptically. "Those photos are from Monday. You said you can't go more than 2 days without sex. Do you expect me to believe you didn't go out Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday?" She chuckled lightly. On Tuesday, he called to say he was back at the hotel, but he started bad-mouthing you again. I told him it was over and I wouldn't see him. Later, he called to apologize. I forgave him but said I was done for the night. We planned to meet on Wednesday instead. He even offered to take me to dinner as an apology. So, the call you got on Tuesday while we were talking, I asked, wasn't from your mom? For the first time, she looked genuinely guilty. No, it wasn't her, she said softly. I hated lying to you. Not enough to stop doing it, I replied coldly. Her eyes widened. Wait, you called me Jules during that call. I remember thinking it was odd. Did you already know then? The photos were sent to me Tuesday morning, I explained, along with transcripts of earlier calls. She sighed heavily. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this. It must have been awful. Let's stay on track, I said firmly. You didn't see him Tuesday, but what about the rest of the week? Her expression shifted and she nodded slightly. We were supposed to have dinner Wednesday night, she admitted. You mean when you were supposedly watching your show? I asked with thinly veiled sarcasm. I really did watch it. It's a good series. But I wasn't fully focused, she confessed. That evening, meeting him was just fulfilling a physical need. For me, it was like going out for lunch with a friend. I need to eat, and if you're not there, I'll go with someone else. I know it's hard for you to understand, but that's how I viewed it. And I never called it making love. That's something I've only done with you. You're stalling, I said bluntly. Stop dancing around what actually happened Wednesday. I'm not stalling, she said, her tone defensive. As I said, we were supposed to meet for dinner, but he never showed. I waited at the restaurant for 45 minutes. I was furious. I've never been stood up before. So I went to his hotel. His car was in the parking lot, so I knew he was there, but he didn't answer the door. I asked the manager to open it, and we found him face down in his steak, dead as a worm. The doctors said he'd been taking blood pressure meds and mixed them with Viagra, which you should never do. It probably caused a massive heart attack. Well, I said dryly, at least he didn't die while he was entertaining you. That would have been inconvenient. Her eyes widened slightly, then she chuckled bitterly. I never thought of that. It would have caused such a mess. His poor wife would have found out everything. I think she already knew, I said. In fact, I suspect she's the one who sent me the photos. Juliana nodded slowly. At least I don't have to wonder if you'll be seeing him again, I remarked, and she gave a faint, wry smile. I won't apologize for what I did, she said. It was something I needed to do, but I am deeply sorry for hurting you and for the way you found out. I was counting the days until your business trips ended so I wouldn't have to do this anymore. But as long as you kept leaving, I knew it would continue. All I could do was minimize the risks and hope that, if you ever found out, your love for me would be strong enough to understand. Why didn't you just come to me? I asked. We could have worked something out. I could have handled things differently. Maybe even taken you with me on trips. She shook her head. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who nitpicks about how you provide the lifestyle we have. You love your work, and we've had an amazing life together. I didn't plan this. It just happened. By the time I realized how far it had gone, it was too late to take it back. I stared at her for a long time, lost in thought. So, she finally asked, what happens now? I stood and went to the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine. Pouring us each a glass, I set the bottle on the table and handed her one. I sat back down and drained half of mine in one gulp. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to think carefully. We've been together for so long, and I thought you loved me as much as I loved you. Yes, we had a great bed life. And yes, we were intimate often. But you weren't the only one who struggled when I left. I also went without sex for weeks, even months. I had opportunities to have lunch with other women, but I stayed true to our vows. I can't understand how you could let your physical need override everything. Our promises, our marriage, our life together. Was it just for sex? Are you going to claim some kind of sex dependence? Do we need to send you to therapy? She started to speak, but I raised a hand. No, please, let me finish. I let you explain, so give me the same courtesy. I refilled her glass and then mine. I have so many questions. How can you separate sex and love so easily? I always thought men were the ones who could do that, not women. If you're being honest about not loving any of them, then you risked everything for bad sex. How do you think that makes me feel? And what about the future? Men's sex drives decrease with age while some women's increase. Am I supposed to come home one day and find some young guy in our bed because I can't keep up? How can I live with myself knowing our entire marriage was a lie? Dozens, maybe hundreds of men over the years? You say you got tested, but that doesn't eliminate the risk. You could have given me something deadly, HIV even. You could have eliminated us both. Where would that leave our children? Her face tightened, and she began absent-mindedly rubbing her left arm. I smiled grimly. Peter was a piece of trash, I said, but he caught feelings for you. He told me he even canceled dates with other women whenever you called. Her eyes widened in shock. When did you talk to Peter? Oh, I said, my tone chilling. We had a chat the night he died. I wanted to make sure you'd never see him again. Panic crept into her face. What did you do to him? She asked, her voice trembling. I leaned forward, my voice low and cold. What happened to him was a consequence of his actions, and now you understand the price of betrayal. I sat there in silence after my revelation, letting the weight of my words sink into the space between us. Juliana froze, her face an unreadable mask, but her hands trembled slightly, her fingers clutching the stem of her wine glass as though it was the only thing tethering her to reality. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and in that moment I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. Not fear of the truth, but fear of what I might do next. I've given you everything, I continued, my voice steady and devoid of the anger I thought I'd feel. A home, a family, a life you said you wanted, and yet it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing her before she could form an excuse. Don't you dare try to justify this anymore. You've said your piece and I've listened, but now I need you to listen. I stood and began to pace, the wine in my glass sloshing dangerously close to the edge. You know, it's funny. All these years I thought I was the one living a lie. My job, my secrets, they were my burden to bear alone. I justified it because I told myself I was protecting you, protecting us. But the real lie wasn't my work. It was this, us, this marriage, this illusion of trust and loyalty you've so carefully constructed while systematically tearing it apart. Her tears began to fall then, silent streams down her face that she didn't bother to wipe away. But I felt nothing for them. No sympathy, no regret, no pity. Just a hollow ache where love had once been. I've eliminated men for less, Juliana, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Her gasp was audible, a sharp intake of breath that seemed to echo in the stillness. And yet here you are sitting across from me alive and well. Do you know why? She shook her head, her lips trembling too much to form a coherent answer. Because I'm tired, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Tired of the lies, the betrayals, the endless cycle of hurt. Eliminating you might bring me satisfaction in the moment, but it wouldn't fix what's already broken. It wouldn't undo the years of deception or the pain of realizing I've been a fool. And most of all, it wouldn't heal the damage you've done to our family. At this, she broke down completely, her sobs racking her body as she buried her face in her hands. I watched her crumble, unmoved by her display of guilt or sorrow. In the past, I might have rushed to comfort her, to reassure her that everything would be okay, but not this time. I'm leaving, I said simply, the finality of the words hanging in the air. She looked up, her tear-streaked face a portrait of desperation and disbelief. You can't, she whispered, her voice hoarse. What about the kids? What about us? There is no us, I replied coldly. Not anymore. As for the kids, they're adults now. They'll understand in time, and they'll still have you, at least until they find out who you really are. But me? I can't stay. I won't. I set my glass down on the table with a deliberate motion, the sound of the glass meeting wood punctuating my decision. I'll be gone by morning. You'll hear from my lawyer soon enough. Until then, consider this your warning. Don't follow me. Don't call. Don't try to find me. Because if you do, Juliana, I'll show you just how far my patience can stretch. Her sobs grew louder as I walked away, leaving her alone with her shattered world. Upstairs, I packed a single bag, essentials only. The rest could stay. I had no use for the trappings of a life that no longer felt like mine. By the time the sun began to rise, I was already on the road, the villa shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was nothing more than a memory. A part of me wanted to look back, to see if she was standing in the doorway, watching me leave. But I didn't. I couldn't, because the man I'd been, the husband, the father, the fool, was gone. And in his place was someone new, someone free. The road stretched out before me, endless and full of possibilities. For the first time in years, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. Not for redemption, no, that was a luxury I didn't deserve, but for something simpler, something purer, a chance to start over. And so I drove, leaving behind the wreckage of a life that was never truly mine. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would face it on my own terms, free from the shadows of betrayal and deceit. For better or worse, this was my story now, and it was far from over.